Started. Everyone, tonight is Monday, November 17th, 2025. This is a City of Minnetonka study session. I'll call the meeting to order. A note that Mr. Funk will address is that there is an addendum to the agenda, but with that, let's just do introductions, and Miranda, we'll start with you.
Miranda Donovan, Assistant City Manager.
Sarah Donovan, HR Manager.
Good evening, Eric Nelson, City Attorney.
Darren Nelson, Finance Director.
Mike Funk, City Manager.
Nancy Foster Bolden, Ward 1.
Kimberly Wilburn, at large.
Rebecca Shack, Ward 2.
Brad Worsham, Mayor.
Kizzy Coakley, Ward 4.
Debbie Calvert, at large, seat A. Paula O'Malley, Ward 3.
Will Manchester, Public Works Director.
Julie Wishnock, Community Development Director.
Kevin Fox, Fire Chief.
Kelly O'Day, Recreation Director.
Scott Boardman, Police Chief.
Sarah Westy, Assistant Recreation Director.
Sarissa Saraki, Senior Management Coordinator.
Joel Mary, Assistant Finance Director.
Derek Metzger, Deputy Fire Chief.
Jason Tate, Deputy Police Chief.
Nadia Pierzu, Minnetonka resident.
Dana Minion, Minnetonka resident.
Tom Stockert, Minnetonka resident.
Thank you all. So we've got that done. So next items are business items, and the first item is, I don't know, Mr. Funk, if you have anything you want to add, otherwise we'll jump right into the next item.
Yeah, just real quickly,
Yes.
Mayor and Council, just related to the addenda, there is an addenda for item 3B, which is a 2026 budget related items. There is a sheet in front of you explaining that. It's also accessible on your iLegislate. Staff did receive an additional email correspondence after the packet was published. The other thing that we want to note is that Mr. Nelson and the assessing team also tracks phone calls related to the budget, especially after truth and taxation statements are mailed. Just want to put on the record, as noted in the addenda, that we did receive as staff 9 phone calls related to the budget. So those are kind of documented as just phone calls. We'll also note later in the presentation that in addition to the 1 email noted here this evening, there were 4 comments in Minnetonka Matters, and we'll cover that public engagement process later. But as of today, as of right now, this is covering the 1 email that we received earlier.
All right, very good. And then just to add to that, we will take more comments between now and the when the budget has to be approved. So that opportunity exists for our residents. So with that, the first item on the agenda is the city manager review process. And so, Miranda, Ms. Dahman, you have that, and please take it away.
I do. I'll get started with this. I do have our HR Manager, Sarah Donovan, with us tonight, who will help facilitate the conversation with me. So tonight, we are going to establish a shared understanding of the city manager review process. This is our 3rd conversation around this topic, and hopefully we're reaching really close to the finish line. We'll confirm competencies and performance areas to be assessed and align on rating definitions and expectations, which came out of the City Council retreat back in July. So review of current evaluation framework. So each year the city manager undergoes a performance review based on the contract. It requires to have it in the fourth quarter of every year. Currently, the council completes a document and our directors complete the same document. I collect all of that information, I put it into a spreadsheet, take all of the names off so it's all, no names are on there, and then we send it out, and then we go into closed session for the city manager review. Over the past couple of years, I've heard various complaints of this form being outdated, not very clear to understand. We had 5 rankings. So last October, when we discussed this, there was interest from the council to revamp the form to make it better understandable, a little bit clearer. And then at July of this year, we were trained on performance reviews at the retreat. And then I heard from council that we do want to continue updating the document, maybe condense it a little bit, get clear expectations, more definitions involved, a better rating scale with better definitions underneath it. Coincidentally, this year, and Sarah will talk about it, one of the HR massive projects on their desk is revamping our entire non-union performance management system. So this is a project that Sarah has been working on all year with all of our directors, as well as City Manager Funk on the director's performance review. So with that, we're to the point now where we're now aligning what she's been doing with all of us now with council. So she'll help work with council this evening to go through her recommendations on updated form, provide options on a scaling system, go through the definitions, and then this year we would just use the paper document, and then hopefully next year we would do a full training with council to move it into a system we're calling NeoGov, which is what the non-unions are using. So hopefully no more after this year that clunky spreadsheet. Hopefully we can do it in a better system that's easier for everyone to complete and understand. So, and then in Article 3 of the city manager contract, I just wanted to state that it does say the evaluation must be based on criteria developed jointly by the city and the manager, and with the options for revisions as determined by city council in consultation with the manager. So Mike may get to jump in tonight because an updated form does constitute in his article that he does get a say. And then of course under state law, we can go into closed session at the city manager's review during that process. Tonight will be all open. I'm hoping to do that review the first or second meeting in December. Right now it's slated for December 15th, but all of our December meetings get really busy, and so hopefully we can find the meeting that maybe we can get into closed session a little bit earlier. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah. And this is going to be more of, we'll go through a section and then turn it back to the mayor and help facilitate the conversation. Then we'll move to the next section as well. So I'll turn it to Sarah.
Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. Okay, so first we'll just kind of maybe cover what we've done to date with the employee performance. As Miranda indicated, we've been working on this since early 2025, my team and I, with the work that we are doing with the employees. So we kicked off an 2025 initiative to improve our performance review process. We had a lot of inconsistency across the city, different forms being used or different time frames being used. And so we're just looking to improve that for all employees, full-time and part-time. And we want it to be meaningful and obviously legally sound. So we began by gathering feedback from department leadership, again, as Miranda mentioned. We talked with our directors and gathered a lot of feedback, what works, what doesn't, what tools or structure they need to make the process more effective. And then their inputs shaped several core components, which includes the timing of our reviews, training needs, and then how we ensure accountability and follow through for our performance reviews. And then again, as Miranda mentioned, we are doing all of that in NeoGov. We're in the final stages and final refinements of what that form and process will look like in the system. So we're getting super close and hope to be rolling out the form and the trainings here soon. And then alongside the form, we drafted a performance review policy, and that outlines the purpose of the evaluations, which is supporting professional growth, aligning employee goals with the city mission and values, and then ensuring a clear and fair process for feedback. So obviously, we think that this is a good timing for aligning the city manager performance evaluation and having this discussion. You'll see it is intentionally aligned with that citywide work. And we approach this as an extension of our overall performance philosophy. So just a quick kind of overview of what is included on our employee review. So again, all of our reviews are going to be in NeoGov Perform, which is the software we use. Our employee self-evaluation uses open-ended questions. So we'll send employees an evaluation to evaluate themselves. And we have these as open-ended questions rather than numeric self-ratings. We designed it this way to encourage employees to share meaningful narratives about what they consider their key accomplishments, priorities, and needs, rather than focusing on trying to justify a score. So this approach gives supervisors a richer context, and it reduces rating disparities and supports a more authentic development-focused conversation. Sometimes if an employee rates themselves a certain way, a supervisor rates themselves another, it can cause some tension. So, and then we kind of dive in after the self-eval to a couple of different areas where employees are rated. Currently, we're using a 3-point scale. We're actually possibly changing that to a 4-point scale. That's one of those refinements that we're working on. You'll hear more about that later. But the areas that employees are rated on are our shared values. So for each of our shared values, directors, managers will rate on a scale of 1 to 3. We also have department division competencies. So that was the conversations we had with our directors at really fine-tuning what competencies they wanted to measure employees on in their areas. And then if you are a supervisor or manager or a director, there's a set of supervisor, manager, and then director competencies as well. And so again, all of those are rated on those 3-point scales, potentially a 4-point scale soon. And then the last part of our employee review is the short-term and long-term goals. So that's kind of a quick overview of the employee process. I just wanted to showcase that before we jump into maybe more of the discussion piece on Mike's stuff. So. All right. Actually, so the city manager current competencies, hopefully this works pretty well here. I'm sure you guys are very familiar with these because this is the same form that you've been using. I won't go through and read each of them because I know you're very familiar, but financial strength, and so basically it has all of our strategic priorities individually. And then if you go down below, again, this is the current form. There's some more competencies listed here. So leadership, organizational management, mayor and council support, fiscal management, community relations, strategic planning, and then shared values. So that's the current form. I'm sure that looks familiar to all of you. Minimize that. And then, okay, and then here are the new ones. So basically what we did, we took the initial, I think there were, how many were there, like 12 maybe? Yeah. Of the competencies, and we kind of tried to just streamline them and combine them a bit. So we pared them down and then combined the strategic profile into one
Can I
reading.
ask a question?
Yeah.
Is there any way we could make that bigger?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, let me see if I can't even see that little plus sign.
Right. Thank you
Is that
so
good?
much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, so, and after I'm done with this section, I will stop and there'll be time for, obviously, you guys to have a conversation. So the previous evaluation form had quite a few separate competencies, so some of them were very detailed, and we felt that several of them overlapped. And so we looked for ways to simplify and streamline the framework without losing the substance. So now we're down to 5. So there's 5 competencies listed here that we're hoping capture a wide range of what those are. And so the outcome is just a more focused set of 5 competencies that cover the same responsibilities. So I'll just go through these new ones, and I will read each of these 5 and then open it up for the council to discuss and with some questions that we have. So leadership strategy and results, provides clear direction, advances council priorities, models ethical leadership, and ensures policy decisions are executed with measurable, effective results. Competency 2, council relations and communication, keeps council informed, builds trust, and navigates governmental and community dynamics effectively. Organizational management and staff development, builds effective teams, develops staff, and ensures accountability across departments. community engagement and public trust, communicates effectively with residents, promotes transparency, and maintains credibility. And then financial management and stewardship, oversees budget, ensures fiscal responsibility, and aligns spending with priorities. So those are the 5 competencies that we took and we kind of streamlined them from the prior form. And so I guess our questions to you would be, do you feel like these are the right areas? Are we covering enough of what the council feels is important? And are there any competencies that need to be added back in, combined, et cetera?
All right, well, thank you. And council, your thoughts on this approach with 5 competencies and I guess the 3 rating.
We'll get to the ratings next.
Okay,
Yep.
okay, so the competencies, pardon me, I'm jumping ahead. So thoughts, Mike, go ahead.
I haven't seen the presentation.
He has not.
So I'm not sure what is coming next. One of the things that I talked with both Miranda and Sarah about is just different sections of the form. Competencies is one section.
Yeah.
Then there'll be open-ended questions is another section. And so I didn't know if you wanted to go through, just kind of show the totality of the form, then go back to competencies, because that might help you.
Yeah, no, I think that
Yeah.
provides
Get a
for
holistic
perspective,
view.
so I think that's a
Yeah.
good suggestion.
Sure.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So yeah, I'll start from the top. So
Yeah.
I have the overall rating scale, which we'll get to this in a little bit,
Right.
but I am going to be recommending a 4-point rating scale. And then each competency listed, and under each competency, I've actually provided a definition for example, exceeds expectations, what that would look like with this particular competency, if that makes sense. So they're specific right here. These definitions are specific to each competency. So it goes through each of the competencies, goes all the way down to our open-ended questions. And we pared those down to 3 open-ended questions, basically comments related to performance across the above competencies, examples of any areas of improvement, and then provide examples on, this was one that was on the prior form and we carried it over. Please provide examples on how this employee makes a difference in the organization and our community. And then to end, we have our goals section. So this is the city manager's kind of area to talk about, these were the goals that were established last year. Here's the progress towards each of those goals, including key accomplishments, challenges, measurable outcomes, and then what the city manager would identify as most significant impacts or lessons learned. And then we get into looking ahead, so upcoming year goals, goals that are being proposed for the upcoming year, any support or resources needed, and then long-term goals, so longer-term multi-year goals, and then how do these long-term goals align with the city's broader vision. And then here is where the council kind of would weigh in with their goals and any feedback they have on the city manager's goals that they have presented. Does that help?
It does help.
Okay.
So I think the question is the same. Initially, let's talk about the competencies and any thoughts on, from the council on these, or Mike, if you have a comment you want to make as well. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mayor, Council. If you look at those competencies, and I think for full transparency, we talked with Miranda and Sarah just about how this would look, because as they were noting, we want to align, separating myself personally out of it, just making sure that the city manager role aligns with the other staff members and how we look at different competencies. And so, in talking with them, I think it does make, again, this is the conversation we have, is paring it down a little bit to streamline it. Certainly we want to make sure that these competencies reflect what's important to the council. That's ultimately what that I want to hear from you, and certainly they need from direction from you is, are these the right competencies? Because on the one thing I'll just note, then I'll turn it back over to you, is in the current form that Miranda pointed out, we list the 6 strategic
priorities
noted in there, and I think here we just combined it, and that is, do we need to rate each strategic priority? In its totality, are we meeting the city's strategic plan? So that's kind of one of the big paring downs. Otherwise, a lot of the others are very consistent with the other ones, just worded better verbiage. Otherwise, it's similar, just really kind of streamlining that, again, strategic plan elements. Is that fair to say?
Yep. I think the one that maybe would overlap would be the fiscal management. However, we felt that was such a large part of what Mike does alongside council, so we did, that one is again separate, but otherwise they're all in the first.
Good. So council, comments on this, Rebecca?
Thanks, Brad. I think overall, to me, this makes a lot of sense. I think streamlining it. Also, you know, as much as our strategic priorities are important, I'm not sure they lend themselves always to great analysis from a review perspective. And I always thought that, you know, we as a council bear some responsibility on the ability to meet some of those strategic priorities. So I think this is a better, more focused on the job at hand approach. And I do also, only because I think it does make a difference, seeing the explanations within the ratings will be really helpful, I think, as we try to give consistent feedback across the 7 of us. That's really my hope, is that this lends to more concrete feedback rather than this wide chasm of responses.
Other comments? Deb?
Yeah, I agree with Rebecca, and I also, it's one of those things where I'm glad we pared it down. And also, when you put a lot of things in one bucket, then you're, you know, these are a lot of things that deal, you know, we have ethics over here and direction over here. It's a lot of stuff that's sort of all over the place. It makes sense because it really is leadership and you know, which goes along with strategy and results, but it's also, you know, to quantify all of that. I think, you know, the open-ended questions, to me, it's always about the narrative and how to, you know, tease it out, because there might be, you know, fabulous on one aspect of this and meets expectations, you know, on another. So that's my only thought. Is it better to lump it together or break it out? I think we can get at it, but I think that's what we're going to find, is that hopefully there's a way to tease things out in the narrative.
Other comments, council members? Thoughts?
I was going to
Kizzy.
say, I like the fact that it was narrowed down. However, for me, even though, you know, yeah, we've seen the other document, you know, plenty of times, but it's like, for me, I have to have it like together so I can do comparison, what makes, you know, what the difference are. And so I can't really say yay or nay. It's just, you know, I heard what you said, that you streamlined it and, you know, you kind of grouped it together, but for me, I have to like really see it hand to hand, like face to face, where I have both documents and been able to compare it that way versus just knowing that or hearing that you know, kind of combined it together. So.
Other comments? Thanks, Kizzy.
Just have a question.
Paula, yeah.
Is it possible to scroll down and see the other competencies? Because this is the first time, unless this was somewhere that I missed, that I'm seeing it. Okay, thank you. And also, thank you for putting so much work into this, because this is hard to do.
Yeah, organizational management and staff development. I don't know if we're as capable of, I mean, is that something that we really have insight into? I don't know, maybe other people feel that they do. So that's just a question. I don't know that I feel.
I know we have a pretty incredible staff.
Right, but it's not, since we
Yeah, I was just
don't
thinking the same thing, that I don't know that we can
evaluate
really evaluate that well, because we're not here.
We're not, yeah.
But don't you think the directors are going to do this as well? And also, I think our engagement with the directors reflects on this pretty directly, not to use the word too many times.
Yeah.
But,
Say direct again.
yeah, exactly. I mean, that's where we've got, I feel like, quite an intimate knowledge about how that interface goes.
If I could, Mayor, just bounce off that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Later in the slides, we get to this, but one of the slides is, what does the council want to hear from directors? I know a lot of times when director completes the same document as council, many of us leave a lot of the sections blank that are really council decisions. So we could, if the council wanted, take that one and then maybe our shared values, and the directors fill out that form for council feedback. If that would be helpful to complete the same and or maybe a slightly different form, depending on the needs that council would like to hear from the staff side.
Okay, other thoughts? And let's just kind of roll down so we see all the competencies.
There's 4.
Yep. Because I think that as I listen and I think about this, I mean, yeah, clearly the organizationally, the city manager reports to the council. Doesn't report to the mayor, doesn't report to any individual council member, reports to us collectively. And so, yeah, it's our job to evaluate the performance of the city manager. At the same time, we have one view of the city manager because of where we sit organizationally. And so, you know, it's probably not likely, or it's not really feasible for the council to do a really thorough and objective evaluation of the city manager because we're looking at his role from his or her role from, you know, a given perspective. So I think it's important that we also hear from the directors and other people, the input, so we get the complete picture. Now, so then we're kind of faced with, okay, what's the best way to do that? And my view on this is, I think this does a nice job, but I think you need the open-ended questions because that's where you kind of fill in the gaps and also fill in the difference in perspective. Now, some people are going to spend a lot of time with those open-ended questions, and some people are not. And so that's going to be a bit of a mixed bag, but I think it's an issue that, okay, you don't have to answer all the questions, but if there's an issue that you're concerned about, this is a place, get it in there. And then I think, as you said, Miranda, as staff fills this out, if there's something that they really, or if council doesn't have a clue on, if we go back to the one, go back up and talk about organizational, next one down, keep going, let's see. So, okay, organizational management and staff development. You know, I probably wouldn't have as great a view on staff development as I would on organizational management. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know when an organization is working well and when it's not. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, again, I think, you know, I mean, I don't want to make that a rating. I think there should be an opportunity to just say not applicable or, you know, do not have the perspective or experience to comment. But, you know, I think this is thorough. So that would be kind of my quick kind of summary critique. But I don't want to shut other people's comments off. I just wanted to say that that's kind of the way I would look at it. But really use those open-ended questions. Patsy.
Yeah, and I also think, though, that our dealing with staff reflects on the city manager's job to organize, you know, I mean, and how, so we do have like you were saying, we do have a certain perspective, you know, where we sit, but it also where we sit, we have sort of a holistic view that we can understand. I mean, like having conversations with Julie, you know, like going through the chain of residents coming through me, going through, you know, if that was an experience that I didn't understand or wasn't getting stuff or, you know, was too whatever, that would reflect the city manager. You know what I mean? So I think we can determine in a certain way his organizational skills and the way, and not him in terms of, but the city manager.
Right.
In general. Do you know what I mean? And also, I think that it's really important that we, that we can say, look, this is, we look at this as a city council when we hire the next manager. Like, we look at how we're dealing with the staff, and that reflects on the city manager, if that makes sense. So
It does.
Good point.
Other thoughts or comments? We don't,
One, I just,
Yep,
you know,
go ahead.
I just quickly add, and this is an important one for me, I think, in this role, because and you already said it, you see a snippet of what I do, and then there's lots that happens on a day-to-day basis. And so, as a city manager, you want to make sure the council has the full picture of all the work that happens. And so, for a city manager, that's an important one, because there's, that's one of, I think, personally, that's one of my strengths, is that competency. And I think what Miranda will get to, and Sarah will get to, is then the sequencing of this, because in the past, I think Miranda already touched on this, the directors would fill out the report simultaneously as the council is filling it out. And so perhaps switching that batting lineup up in the sense of having directors fill out the form and getting that to you prior to you filling out the form. So you at least get a sense of what directors have to say.
Yeah, I think that would be
And that would
Yeah.
be helpful,
Yeah.
because I think you're right, Patsy. You do get a flavor of that, but not the full breadth.
Yeah.
Right.
And so having some feedback from directors might help you in answering that question.
other thoughts? You know, I'll add to that from the perspective that, I mean, certainly for the council, we want to do a good job of this. This is an important part of our job description, of our role. And the success of the city is very dependent on, having an effective city manager and holding that city manager accountable for, how things are running in the city. And I think that, so I think that perspective, having a little better understanding of the staff's perspective is helpful. Again, organizational management, I think I get a pretty good sense for that. Staff development, I mean, I know we do things. I mean, we do insights. I know staff members attend conferences and seminars on how to improve their skills, and I think there's good support of that. But I don't think we as a council understand the nitty-gritty of that. We don't know what conferences Mr. Nelson or is Darren going to, or what's Julie or Scott or Kevin. I mean, and I don't know if we need to know that detail, but I think when you consider staff development, that's relevant, and the staff knows. So it's just it's kind of having that more complete perspective, because we're not necessarily going to get it as a council. So that's kind of what I think. I think the approach you've described makes sense. Any other thoughts? I mean, our goal is to get it right. All right, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. I'll move to the next section.
All right, so now we're going to talk about the, can you bring it back up?
Did you see all the competencies again?
Yeah, well, it never hurts to roll through them. And I would say, I appreciated what Kizzy said. I always like to see new versus old. I mean, I like to know it. So what I would recommend coming out of this meeting, we're going to have a good conversation here tonight, but I would not mind having the old form and the new form next to each other, and say, council, if you have any further feedback based on looking at these side by side, please provide it, because I think that does make, that's hard to do on a PowerPoint and so forth, but if we had that and could use that for further input, I think that would be useful.
Perfect. We can add that as an additional addenda, so it's in the packet, and then
Okay.
we'll email that out.
Great.
I think we have to be sensitive to time.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of
Especially
time.
we have the form, the directors are gonna fill it out first, we have
Yeah.
to fill it out. So everybody's probably gonna have to be pretty
Timely.
on the ball this year.
Yeah. Good point, Rebecca, thank you.
Okay, so we'll just run through the rating scale really quickly. So this is, again, the current rating scale that you see on the city manager form. It's currently 5-point scale and has a wide range of ratings. What often happens when you have a lot of ratings like this, so up to 5, is it can cause clustering, where most ratings tend to fall in the middle. People avoid lower or higher scores. Sometimes the difference between exemplary and outstanding can be kind of gray. It's not really clear, and definitions just tend to overlap. So when you've got this many choices, it can just make it more difficult when you're doing the ratings. And it just causes inconsistency a lot of times. So this is the 3-point scale that I talked about a little bit earlier. I'm gonna showcase this, but then go to the next slide that has the 4-point scale, because it is this exact scale with one thing added to it. So, so this is the 4-point scale. So, oh yeah, it is kind of small. Yeah, you can even bring up the form too. That might be easier to see the word form. So really the reason why we kind of tried to pull this down, some of the things I just described to you, is to make the definitions a little bit more simplistic. The 4-point scale adds the growth opportunity category in there. So if you can see, we have exceeds expectations, meets expectations, growth opportunity, and needs improvement. So on the 3-point scale, what we saw is oftentimes there's this in between where maybe you really see a growth opportunity, meaning, okay, they're not quite where they need to be. They're not necessarily getting a 1, but we want to have that area to call it out as like a focus area, right? And so you can kind of see it in the definition there of growth opportunity. Generally meets many job expectations, but falls short in one or more areas, shows potential and willingness to improve with additional focus, support, or development performance is expected to reach full competency. So it's kind of just like a in-between when they don't really fall into needs improvement, doesn't really fall into meets expectation, it just kind of gives you that in-between. So this is our recommended rating scale. And again, it just kind of prevents council from having to choose between needs improvement and meets if there's that in-between that is needed. The other thing is this will be using the same scale for the staff and the city manager, so it just provides organizational alignment, simplifies training, communication, all that. And then we have provided council with better definitions. We showed that on the form a little bit, and I'll show that again, in each of the competencies. So you can see how does this rating scale, or what does this look like for each competency. And let me see this and just kind of scroll down a little. So again, you can see here, competency 1, I'll just read through this one as an example. Leadership strategy and results. So exceeding expectations looks like anticipates issues and presents strategic data-informed options, drives major initiatives ahead of schedule. Meets looks like provides clear direction and ensures progress on council priorities. And you can kind of see the other two there. Growth opportunities, some priorities move forward while others lag without sufficient follow-through. And then needs improvement, lack of strategic clarity, priorities stall or misaligned. Because the feedback that I heard from Miranda was, the definitions, that was kind of the hardest part, and maybe across a large group when you're rating one individual, to make sure it's consistent and you guys are rating the same things. We figured maybe providing definitions for each of the competencies would help with that.
Really helpful. Absolutely.
So our recommendation is this 4-point scale. Again, this is what we are leaning towards now as staff as well. We initially created that 3-point scale, but like that go-between for managers to be able to choose that. And so this is our recommendation.
Council, comments?
I think it's good.
Yeah,
I really like it.
Thank you.
I got a couple of thoughts, if I may. I like it. I think it's a significant improvement. And I go back to, when we evaluate our performance against our strategic priorities, basically it's a stoplight system. It's red, yellow, green. And so a 3-point scale is red, yellow, green, simple. I suspect, but it makes you make some tough decisions. Giving somebody the red, a 1, is a big decision, and it's got to be pretty clear that it's a 1, or you're gonna probably round up because to be considerate. And I think the I think that having the fourth does create a little wiggle room, but I would, that one change I would suggest is that, you know, it says, you know, may fall short on one or more, and more is too much as far as I'm concerned. One or two, you know, you're close, but you know, you're Maxwell Smart, you missed it by that much, you know. Otherwise, because I think, you know, I think one or more, well, you know, one person's more could be 2, and another person's more could be 10. And so I think bring a bit more specificity to that rating, I think makes it more valuable, would be my comment.
Yep.
Makes sense.
And Council, you're welcome to disagree with me. I'm not saying that's right. It's one person's opinion.
Oh, I
No,
think
I
that,
agree.
that's a good point.
Okay,
All the way that one.
anything else, or Sarah, you've got more? Okay,
I think I'm
okay, keep going.
almost done. This one.
No, it's good, thank you.
Yes, okay, so, again, the frequency, so we're almost done, so evaluation process logistics, frequency would stay the same, it's the December of each year we do the evaluation. I usually start sending the form right after, the Thanksgiving break, so we will be tight this year, but we're gonna make it work across the board. Again, role of the council, and then directors in the process, so that's where we're gonna discuss too. It sounds like there's flavor to have the directors complete it first. I will give them a really tight timeline. We'll get it done, I promise, and we'll get that to council when I send the evaluation forms. And then, again, process for compiling, I will continue this year to compile all of the data and then summarize the council feedback in the same format we've been using. We will do paper this year, the spreadsheet will look the same. Again, we'll move into that electronic system next year and do training and for that as well. And then confidentiality and transparency considerations, again, kind of what we've been doing in the past. This won't change for this process. And then next steps, we will finalize the evaluation form based off of today's input. And then the new form and process will be used for Mike's review coming up. Right now we have it slated for December 15th, so we'll kind of work backwards from there and use this form. And then again, we'll make the edits, we'll do the addenda, and allow council the opportunity to weigh in. I know most of us are flying to NLC, so we'll get feedback in and then send this out right around the Thanksgiving timeframe. So thank you, Mayor and Council. And then I think the question was if there's any additional things we're not thinking of or considering.
Great.
Just one
Deb,
quick
go
thing.
ahead.
So, and I've been hammering this every time we talk about it, and it just has to do with making sure that on the day of, that we have sufficient time to have the discussion and finish the discussion properly. So,
Very good.
yeah.
And I mean, this is one of the more important things that we do every year. I mean, this and the budget are, you know, I mean, really key to the performance of our city. So this is important. So I think these improvements are really good.
Yeah.
And very much needed, because I think the old form just was, it was hard to fill out. And, you know, I just think this will be, it's much cleaner, much clearer. And I think that's really good.
I think it'll be interesting to see if the scoring comes more into alignment across the council, or if we still have sort of a different philosophical approach, because you can keep defining and there's always room for interpretation. But as someone who does HR, thank you, because that was a lot of work.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate
Yeah, a lot of work, and thank you for that. And I, you know, to your point, Deb, I think that, I think the clarity of these ratings will make it, I think we will have more alignment because, you know, it takes the philosophical aspect away, which I think is really, you know, I mean, when it says fully proficient, oh, well, and that's like the third lowest score. You know, I mean, You know, that, to me, that was really difficult. I mean, basically, the highest score in the old, it said you walked on water, and I really don't know people who walk on water. So, with all due respect, Mike, I mean, you know, I mean, I think.
Sounds like I need to brace myself.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a challenge. So I think this is much clearer and much easier to make quality ratings. Anyone else, comments? All right. Okay, so that city manager review process, that was worthwhile. Thank you both.
Yes, thank you.
Nicely done. So then the other big topic for tonight is the 2026 budget-related items, the proposed budget, utility rates, annual cellular antenna issues schedule, and grant applications update. So that's a mouthful. Mike, I'll turn it over to you, and you can lead it off.
Yeah, thank you, Brad Council. Tee up the PowerPoint. Got it? Yeah. I guess I can control it. Okay. All right, yes, well, thank you, Brad. I'll kick us off here tonight. Again, to our guests here as well, Mike Fung, City Manager. So I'll start off tonight's presentation. I think I'll go through the first 12 slides, and then we've got another few after that as well. So we'll try to streamline it. We tried to streamline this tonight, and so some of the slides that you might have seen in earlier study sessions, even back in the September council meeting where we adopted the preliminary levy, some of those slides are out of tonight. It's really kind of the mission, vision, some of the depths of the strategic plan. We want to streamline it tonight because I know you've seen those before. We'll weave those back in at the December council meeting when we get to the final adoption. So we'll have more of a public-facing explanation at that point. So you'll see that those slides aren't in here tonight. Tonight we're just kind of going to dive right into it and get really to the core of tonight's conversation. So that's why you'll see some of the slides that you normally would see not in here. Really just kind of kicking things off, and again, I'm going to kick things off. I'm going to stay at a higher level, and then I'll hand it off to Darren, where he'll get more granular as the conversation progresses. So first off, overall city budget. Now this is a newer slide you haven't seen before. Really what we're trying to do in this slide is capture the city's budget. Because oftentimes I might get asked, maybe you are asked from a constituent, well, how much is the city's budget? Because oftentimes, and there's so many different, we're gonna use the word buckets a lot tonight. So there's a lot of different buckets regarding the city's budget. So this slide just really tries to illustrate what is the entire all funds city budget. It is roughly 124 million, so I am kind of using rounding numbers, and Darren will as well. Speaking rounded numbers here early on. So all of our funds combined is about 124 million. That really falls into 5 categories, or buckets, if you will. 4 of those buckets are on the left-hand side of this slide. Those are called or defined as, in our audit, our governmental funds. And those are the 4 buckets, if you will, 4 funds where they are supported by some level of property taxes. So governmental funds, the 4 that are noted there, and I'll just go around kind of clockwise, starting at the top with the yellow circle is our special revenue accounts, our special revenue funds. Divisions that you'll see in special revenues would be our cable TV fund, the ice arena, the marsh, our affordable housing trust fund, electric franchise, and a few others. The other, going around again clockwise, in the green colored circle is what we call our capital project fund. That's our CIP in essence, where we find our streets, our technology, equipment, parks and trails, all sorts of cars, to radios, to everything in our CIP. Then moving around in the brownish colored circle is our debt service, and then our general fund. And I should have noted, and I'll just back up real quickly, of that 124 million total city budget, special revenue accounts is about 7.3 million in the yellow circle. Back to the capital project fund, that's 24.2 million. Debt service is 1.5 million, and then our general fund, 60.1 million. So those are governmental funds, those 4 buckets. The other one is our enterprise funds. That's the 5th bucket. That is water and our sewer, stormwater, environmental recycling, the Willison, Grays Bay Marina, Those funds total about 30.9.
Can we get something like this, added to, for the future, like, kind of break it down, kind of like how you did that, broke it down that way?
Hey, where would you like to see that shown, Kizzy?
Maybe in a document, that we can get sent to us. Cause it's just helpful the way you just broke it down.
Okay, yeah, I'll work with Darren, we'll see how we can communicate this through some of the current budget documents. So I'm glad you find it helpful.
Yeah, that was good.
All right, any questions with that?
I see the mayor over here writing stuff down, so it looks like you might like it too.
All good, all good. No, it's a good, this is good representation.
So the next slide I'm about to show you is revisit our timeline and keep those, it's color coded, so kind of keep those colors in mind. All right. So really, how did we get here? And so on the left-hand side of this, you've seen these dates before. As we often describe, our budget process is 8 months. We start in the spring. Again, I say this more, you've seen this before, Council, but again, I think just want to re-highlight for our guests here this evening. We spend 8 months in our budget process. Going back to March 24th, we have director presentations, and I'll go through this list real quickly, but just keep in mind on the right-hand side of this are those 5 funds. So we've got our special revenue funds, general fund, debt funds, capital project fund, and enterprise funds. And we tried to highlight in here each time that this has been in front of you, which of those funds have you been, that we've talked about and you've been exposed to in those conversations. So on March 24th, director presentations, those are high-level budget presentations by our directors, but they briefly touch on all of those funds noted in one shape or another. Granted, they're not deep dives, but we're starting that budget process talking about it in its entirety. April 28th is when we had our community and business survey. Then again, on May 12th, we had our official budget kickoff where we talk about our general fund, debt service funds, and capital funds. In June is our CIP and EIP. That's where we touch on our special revenue funds, capital funds, and enterprise. In August, it's really, that August study session is dedicated to our operating budget, where we really highlight our general fund and debt funds. In September is when we had our preliminary levy and budget adopted. We touch on all the funds except for enterprise. And then on October 27th, last study session, you had a conversation on utility infrastructure and presentations from staff. That was really enterprise fund focus, which is really more of our utilities. Here we are tonight. So it's our operation budget study session where we are going to touch on all those funds here this evening. And then looking ahead to December 8th, I apologize if I said December 4th earlier, but December 8th council meeting, that's when the final budget and levy will be presented to you for your consideration for adoption. We do have an alternate approval date then on December 22nd, just depending on sometimes weather might cancel a meeting, or if there's something that happens on December 8th, you have an ability to come back on December 22nd for any finalization. Now, again, just kind of, I apologize. On my computer, this looks really good. Up there, it doesn't look as clear. This is all funds. So think of that 124 million that I just showcased for you on that earlier slide. These pie charts really break down all of those funds, all those 5 buckets, if you will. In terms of revenues, on the left-hand side, and again, I apologize, this doesn't show up as well on the TV screen. The blue part of that pie on the left-hand side is taxes. And I mentioned in that first slide, just going back to that quickly, when you think of property taxes, they fund those 4 buckets, if you will. And so we look at those revenues, property taxes is roughly 49% is what that illustrates. I'm just gonna pop ahead to the next slide, but I'll come back to this one. When we look at just the general fund, because we do spend a lot of our attention on the general fund, looking at the general fund, that is more property tax reliant. More close to 78% of property taxes goes towards our general fund operations. But if you pull yourself out of the general fund and look at all of our funds, property taxes represent about 49%. Going around that wheel clockwise, user fees and charges is that orange section. That's roughly 37.5 million or 33%. Next is the gray piece, which is license and permits at 3%, intergovernmental revenue at 5%, and then finishing up with that blue box of other income at 11%. So that's the revenue side of things. And then we categorize, what we try to do is break out the expenses two different ways. The first way is looking by program and then by category. So it's the same expenditures, but slicing it just a little bit differently. So that middle pie graph, starting again, we'll start with the orange, that's street and utilities at 38%. That percentage may seem different to you because oftentimes we speak in terms of general fund, where we have general fund is a certain percentage, different percentage. And we'll get to that here in this next slide. So again, kind of shifting or slicing this a little bit differently. So I'll go around quickly. Expenditures by program, again, that orange is street utilities at 47 million, 47.5 million at 38%. The gray is parks and environment at 11% for 13.392 million. Recreation is at yellow at 11,100,000 at 10%. Development at 6.9 million or 6%, and then general government at 13,678 or about 11%. Again, the last pie chart is then really by category. And this is where we look at, instead of kind of more department, it's then within the department, how do you break those expenses out? Personnel is, I'll start with the blue, I'll start with orange, I've been starting with orange. So capital outlay is 27%, service and charges are 18%, supplies is 4%, the darker blue is debt service at 6%, and then personnel is 45%. And so that's different. You think about personnel, you've heard us say that personnel is 80% of our general fund, and that is true. But when you look at in the totality of all of our budgets, personnel is 45%. So again, it's just a matter of what lens you want to apply it and how you want to break down the numbers. The next page really then looks at the general fund. That usually tends to be our hyper-focus fund that we look at, because that's really where all of us in this room live in terms of our operation. So really just strictly looking at the general fund. I'll start at the left-hand side. Revenues, property taxes is that major piece, 78% of our general fund, which is around 47.6 million. The rest of it makes up for user fees, there's license and permits, intergovernmental transfers, other incomes, and transfers, et cetera. And then we do, again, same slide, expenditures by program and then by category. So by program, this is where in the general fund, public safety makes up 46%. So Will, yes, you're lesser on this one than on the other one, with streets and utilities. But in our general fund, police and fire make up 46%, which is 27.7 million. Street and utilities, again, at that 8.754 million, which is 15%. Parks and environment, 8%. Recreation, 8%. Community development at 7%, and then general government at 16%. By category, it's the same categories again. So again, as we kind of look at general fund only, this is where you've heard us say, or Darren and I say, that personnel is the largest component of our general fund, and it is. It's 78%, which is 46.975 million. Supplies is 4%, and then service and charges is 18%, or roughly 10.8 million. I'll pause there. Any questions on these two and how those are illustrated? Okay.
Paula?
I just wanted to say thank you. I think this is really helpful to have kind of the talking about the overall budget per our discussion today, and then also then scoping in terms of the general project. So kind of having that panning out. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. So that's our goal here tonight, is to start out a little wider and keep working our way narrower.
Anything else? Any other questions?
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate that.
All right, good.
So what this represents, and again, council, you've seen this before, and I think just something personally I think we should be proud of at the city, and that's our commitment to long-term planning. We put a lot of effort into not only looking at today and tomorrow and 2026, but really looking out years in advance. And that's part of being fiscally responsible, is understanding commitments today that we have as an organization, but what is on the horizon and what's going to be happening in the next decade. What feeds into in that bottom, which is our economic improvement plan. Again, for those that EIP, we use a lot of acronyms, so EIP is our economic improvement plan, our CIP, which is our capital improvement plan, and then our operations budget. There's just a lot of planning that happens within our planning. It's kind of planning within the planning. Again, kind of going around this wheel, we have our trail master plan that comes into consideration. We have our climate action and adaptation plan, or CAP. The community and business survey is an important document that gives us information in making these decisions. Our public safety master plan, our strategic plan, our natural resources master plan, or NRMP. And then we have our post plan, which is our park, open space, and trail system plan, our comprehensive plan, and then our facility planning. So a lot of planning documents. We do put a lot of emphasis in looking at all sorts of areas of the city, as we know our operations are complex. So one of the things I think about in business terms is that think of a business that produces widgets. We don't produce widgets. We have different business models, whether we're an enterprise fund, a special revenue fund, a general fund. So the way that we approach business is a lot different than per se like in the private industry. Why does that matter? Is then looking at some of our historical levies. And the reason that we show this to you is not to justify what we do, but to give you a sense of what's happening in other cities and what other cities have been doing in the last 20 years. So this is a comparable city historical levies graph. So this goes back to 2006 through 2025. And so what staff has done is looked at what we call our comparable cities. Those are noted across the bottom, and then looked at all those in the last 20 years and really kind of stacked up each city's levy to look at what's happened in cities the last 20 years, what's happened in cities like Minnetonka the last 20 years. When we look at that aggregate average, the increase, and that's noted up there in the right, the 20-year aggregate average is 99%. Our aggregate average is 96%. So what that tells you is that, and I hope your takeaway is that, as a city, how we stack up against our comparable cities is we're in the middle. We're not, we're kind of in the middle. That we're not the lowest taxed city in the last 20 years, nor are we taxing at the highest rate in the last 20 years. I think that falls in line with the Star Tribune article that came out. Was that this weekend? There's an article on comparing property taxes around the metro. Here we kind of fall in the middle in that article. And if you notice, I kind of scrolled through all the cities in the 7-county metro, and we fell in the middle there as well. So it just gives you a sense of where we are, again, comparing to other cities. Really the heart of our conversation here this evening and throughout our whole budget process is our levy analysis, or what we call our budget drivers. What are the key budget drivers impacting the 2026 proposed levy? So I'll just spend a few minutes on this slide, because this is where I think this is where the rubber meets the road, if you will, in terms of our proposed levy increase for next year. Let's see, is there a mouse I can use to?
Yep, that one.
Is this one?
That one, yep.
Here we go. Thank you. So just to walk through the budget drivers for next year. I'm going to come back to this first line item and just start with the second one listed here. We look at it at staffing. So our staffing, which really represents our cost of living adjustments and our market analysis. I have a couple slides coming up that Ms. Dahman will speak to in terms of compensation and how that's calculated and our goals in compensation. But in terms of starting out a little bit wider here in the early end of the presentation, our COLA and market next year is estimated to be $1,457,000. There's my mouse, which is an add to our levy of 2.6%. So compensation 2.6%. The next line item is health insurance. As you know, council, this last year our insurance went up, it's around 9% on health insurance. That's a cost share with our employees. For the city's share, that's representing $480,000, or just shy of 1% for the tax levy. The next line item is what we call a state mandate. So this is required by the state of Minnesota. Last year, as you know, the state legislature passed the Minnesota Paid Family and Medical Leave Act. Doesn't matter if you're government or private industry, every business in the state pays this. For the city of Minnetonka, this too is a cost share with our employees at 50%. For the city, our share is $150,000, or 0.3% of our proposed levy increase. We do have a position requested for next year, and that's a paralegal position in our legal team. Mr. Nelson is here, and we can ask him questions later about that. That's supporting our legal team. One could argue that is really public safety, because that paralegal is supporting our police department. It's not coded as a public safety initiative, but more or less it's included in our general fund. What's both in the general fund, but we're not coding it as per se investments to, where is it?
Right there.
Right there.
Right here, public safety investments. So that wasn't specifically tied to our public safety master plan, but it is a position that is supporting, again, police efforts. So with those paralegal position, with that paralegal position, that subtotal is 4.7%. And again, I want to come back up here to this top line item. So this number here, and so this is our base levy from 2025 of $55,124,000. This increase of a levy increase of 0.8%, and if you do the math and subtract these two numbers, it's about $400,000. What that represents is two things. It is the city's own cost of living increase. I say COLA, but inflationary increases. So just like anyone at home, the city also is seeing inflationary increases. We see those in dues that we pay. We see that in technology subscriptions. We have a lot of software that we use, and in those contracts, there's inflationary factors built into those. It might be dues paid to the League of Minnesota Cities, it's to the Watershed District, so it's dues and its expenditures that we're incurring, including heat and electricity, is all built into that first line item. The other thing that it builds into is kind of the gap in revenue streams. And what I mean by the gap is, as we analyze other revenue sources, and go back a couple slides, I'll do that here. I'll go back a couple slides. As I noted, in our revenues, not all of it is property taxes, whether you look at all of our funds or even in the general fund. So as a staff, as we look at licenses and permits is a big one. We're really dependent on building permit activity. If there's a decrease in building permit activity, then we rely more on taxes to fill that difference. And so, going back to this slide, so again, this $400,000 in levy increase are contributed to two things: the inflationary factors I mentioned, and also accounting for if there are shortfalls in other revenue streams that we had relied on in previous years. Maybe it's a grant we got, it's no longer gonna be there. And so it becomes part of the tax levy as well. So I'm gonna pause there at that 4.7%, and because I think that's worth noting in that this is pretty much business as usual. It's taking into account, again, staffing in terms of compensation, benefits, our own inflationary costs here at the city, the paid family medical leave, and then one new position. So it's really, as we'd say, if the city was doing nothing different other than adding that position, we would be really around that 4.5% levy increase. Then moving on, these are then other items for, again, council consideration, and the ones that are driving the levy higher than 4.7%. The next area is the ice arena and the marsh. And so this had been more of a number that had been in the general fund in previous years. It had been a transfer out. And so what we want to do is make sure we're transparent in terms of to the council and also to the community that we do have part of our levy that pays for supplementing the ice arena, so it cash flows positively, and for the estimates for the marsh operating next year. So $200,000 for the ice arena, $200,000 for the marsh. That's at $400,000, which increases levy by 0.7%. For capital improvements, we're actually proposing a decrease in the levy of $513,000 from 25 to 26. That's actually a levy reduction of 0.9%. How we're able to do that, if you recall, council, is when we do, after our audits, and we end up with to the good, where our revenues exceed the expenditures per the city's policy, we're transferring that excess revenues over to the capital improvement fund. That helps then offset the levy that might be needed for capital expenditures. So that was a good year last year was a good year for the city. We were able to have a healthy transfer, thus requiring less of a need for the capital improvement levy. So we're able to reduce that levy by $513,000. Then we get into the public safety investments. And so according to the Public Safety Master Plan, you know, we've been on a 5-year trajectory with that plan. Next year in 2026, that investment is $1.464 million, or roughly 2.7% of the levy. And then last, just noting that, again, Council, I know you're aware of this, but for those that are listening, looking at long-term, how do we fund long-term capital needs? And so what the strategy is, and Mr. Nelson will get into greater detail in a few slides, we have $400,000 in current levy dedicated for a future bond issuance. Adding another $400,000 to that kind of steps into what you call kind of transitioning into a future debt issuance. That has a 0.7% levy impact. I'm going to get ahead of you and ask, well, what if we don't do that? And what if we don't do the $400,000? You can do that. We could not do that and save 0.7% on the levy. You can reduce the levy from 7.91 to basically 7.2%, and then it becomes a trade-off. And what I mean by the trade-off is this is a transition into that future debt service. If you decide not to do it, it just means at some point when you do that debt service levy, you're just going to have a greater hit at that time. That number would be double that at some future year. So it's just a matter of your comfort level of planning for that future debt service for facilities. So that gets us to the 7.91%. We consider the HRA levy, and that's a mathematical calculation. So our final levy is 7.87%. That's down a little bit from the preliminary levy. Mr. Nelson will get into later slides of some of the activity that's happened in the last few months on some of the line items that have gone up, some that have gone down. And what staff is presenting here this evening for your consideration is 7.87%, which is slightly less than what was presented to you in September. So I'll pause there. Any questions on the budget drivers?
Questions? It's not like we haven't seen it before.
Hey.
All right, I'm seeing
Take
no
a little
questions,
extra
Mike.
time on
Yep.
it. I know you seem to just take a little extra time on it this evening.
Well, I appreciate it.
Okay. All right, next slide now, and I'll speed up here from here. You've seen this before. This is our 10-year levy history. It doesn't have all of the 5 buckets, if you will, on the bottom. This really highlights the big ones, and that is our CIP, our operations, and debt. That's really mainly where the tax levies fall, are in those 3 categories. Yes, it's, excuse me, we know what's going up. And that's illustrated here on that graph. This is, again, one you've seen before. As we do some projecting, and we think that's good fiscal management is to understand where we are, where we've been, where we are, and where we're going in terms of trying to manage the tax levy. There's a distinguishing piece in here is between that orange and blue line. The blue line represents rewinding the clock a year ago, and we were projecting our future levies. And the orange line represents where we are today. And so after, again, it's always changing, ever flowing. And so what this represents, again, is a change in our projections. And a year ago, we were projecting in 26 around 8%, projected in 27 over 9%, projected in 28 7%. Those are slightly lower. So again, 26 is very kind of where we thought we'd be. In 27, projecting 7.62 versus a 9%. We're projecting in 28 an 8%, 7.4%. And this kind of gets us through our public safety master plan. That's really what that's illustrating is our commitment to public safety, knowing that our levy is going to be higher the last couple of years, knowing that we're going to make those investments the next couple of years. And then as that investment is made, our levy leveling back out to more what we call normal increases. Last slide I have before I turn over to Mr. Nelson is, again, this is another snapshot of our comparable cities. So I showed you the 20-year history. This just takes a look at going into 2026. As both Mr. Nelson and I have talked to our colleagues in other cities, as we've been watching what other cities are doing. Again, this gives you a sense of where Minnetonka kind of stacks up against our peer cities. again, kind of referencing, if we were to just look at general fund alone and business, as I call kind of business as usual, we would be at about 4.5%, which would put us at the lowest of our peer cities. However, we've had a commitment to our public safety master plan, which is the red bar, that 2.7%, and then looking to be proactive in terms of our long-term debt service planning with that 0.7% for future debt, which gives us, again, right at that 7.9%. So again, gives you a comparison of where other cities are. As we know, every city has a story, every city has a narrative of where they're at. I think anecdotally, I would just say to you, as I've talked to many of my colleagues in these cities that are higher than us, as I understand their cities, what's driving their levies is staffing. Edina, for example, why they're at 11% is they're hiring, I'm going to turn to Chief Fox, I'm understanding like 12 or 13 firefighters are being hired in Edina. That's what's driving Edina's levy. Is they're taking a big bite of an apple with fire personnel, and they're bringing them all on board in 1 year. So and that's true of a lot of those cities. It's adding generally public safety staff is what I'm hearing. All right. I think with that, now we're going to get a little more granular. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Nelson. Again, pause real quickly if there's questions for me before I turn it over.
Thanks, Mike. Anything, council, or just keep plugging away?
Okay.
Mike, Darren, go ahead.
So,
Thanks.
thank you, Mayor. So I'll keep it cruising here as well too, but just kind of want to throw out a reminder of kind of the detailed budget drivers that are within our budget for 2026. You saw these back in September-ish timeframe as well too, but just kind of want to highlight them again as well. So as we talk about the public safety master plan, we did hire 9 firefighters last year in 2020. Not last year, well, 2025 is this year. We hired them as mid-year hires. And so hiring them as a mid-year, we then have an impact to the 2026 budget with funding that second half of that. And I think we've talked about that quite a bit, but just so you're aware of that impact. Also included in the 25 and 26 budget was the firefighter compensation as well too. And I think we took care of that with their union contract that was taken care of, and that's accounted for in the 26 budget. Then we look at the Axon service agreement. There was that 10-year agreement that we entered into about a year ago at this point in time for about the 2026 impact is about $615,000 or so. In the first year for 2025, we took care of that within the CIP, and now we transition that over to the general fund. So we have to account for that as an operating expense moving forward on that end of it. And this is, we have a kind of an implementation window here over the next couple of years with that, and so we'll see a little bit of a decrease in the out years. In years like 4 and 5, it'll get back down to kind of its base level of about 600,000, I think it is, on that continuous for the next 5 or 6 years after that at the point in time. But we will have some additional costs coming up in the next couple of years for some of the records management implementation, those types of things. But we are going to see some savings on some elimination of some software applications that we currently have. We'll be able to eliminate those as this contract comes completely on board on that end of it. We're also looking at requesting a community engagement officer, which also was part of the public safety master plan, and that's at a cost of about $140,000. And then our journals as first responders, that was a new program that we entered into this year in 2025. Are paying for that program. It's $300,000 a year for 10 years. Paying for that program in 26 through the CIP. We funded that, and then in 27 we'll plan to bring that into the operational budget. So that'll be a cost for the 2027 budget that we have accounted for in that chart that Mike showed you a couple slides ago with the future projections and whatnot on that end of it. So also included in the budget, and Mike talked a little bit about this, was the non-union class and compensation study. And so the budget is built with, as Mike mentioned, a 3% cost of living increase in there, along with a 0 to 2% market adjustment for non-union employees on that end of it. Union wages are all set by contract at this point in time, and those also have market and COLA adjustments in there as well. Health insurance, Mike touched base on that. That was 8.9%, 50-50 share between employees and the employer. And then the Minnesota Paid Family Medical Leave Act, which is going to be effective here on January 1st, which has an impact of about $150,000. Then one additional FTE request in the legal department that Mike touched on as well too, so that's a paralegal or similar type of position to assist with the caseload and for both prosecution and civil cases in the legal department. And then a couple things that we have, I mentioned in the council report for this study session, is that since September, there have been some ebbs and flows in the budget on that end of it. Some things have increased, some things have decreased. We saw some nice increases in our public safety state aid, in both our police and fire state aid amounts, and so we were able to project that, and that those savings would have went in and would have reduced the budget. On the flip side of it, I found a couple other items that I had miscalculated doing the initial budget run on the preliminary levy with some of the Axon agreements and such like that. I had doubled up accounting for some of the software applications that were going away in two different spots, and so I didn't notice those until after the fact, which they ended up being pretty close to the same amount as the public safety state aid that we were getting. So I had that, and then within our cable television fund, we had, over the last number of years, several years up to that fact, we've been moving some of those expenditures out of the cable TV fund. We've moved all our personnel out of there over the last couple of years. I think we're now, it's just our part-time employees that do the video recording that are there, and the rest of those employees have been moved over to the general fund. But we also have in that cable TV, we've had a number of expenditures that aren't necessarily cable TV related, and so the cable TV fund had always funded those because it had franchise fee revenue to support that. And so a couple examples of those are Summerfest and Spooktacular and the Farmers Market were functions or programs within the cable television fund. And so we've been trying to find a way to get those over to the general fund because they're really truly recreational programming type of programs, and so they should be supported by the general fund. We haven't found a way yet, but what we did is we included the expenditures in the general fund, but then we're going to do a transfer from the cable television fund to the general fund in 2026 to equal those expenditures, and then the plan is to try to wean ourselves off of that transfer over the next several years on that end of it. So now at least we have the expenditures in the right category or right area, and then we'll work on getting rid of that transfer over the next several years on that end of it. So those are kind of some of the things that have been driving the budget prior to the preliminary budget or preliminary levy, and then since the September date. Then we also have the facility improvements as well too. That's that additional 0.7% that we're talking about as well too. And so this just talks about the community facility study that we had back in May of 2024. And initially we had added some dollars last year's levy to kind of take on some of those projects, and we decided to kind of hold off and wait on that. And so so we're looking at now, what we're looking at is in the preliminary levy, we have some dollars set aside to kind of, as Mike mentioned, to step into a future debt issuance to help pay for the community center improvements and or Fire Station 2 improvements as well there too. Community center improvements, we've estimated at about $4 million or so based off of the bids that came in 2021, which were, they were in that $3 million, $3.2 million range, somewhere in that ballpark. So just off the cuff math of thinking, when something might happen, what the cost of that may be on that end of it. And then looking at the fire station improvements, Chief Fox, we had the facility improvement study session earlier this year as well too on some of that. And obviously Station 2 is our priority at this point in time. The remodel of that is $2.5 million to a full rebuild is a little over $9 million or so on that end of it and such. So trying to find ways to make that work. And trying to find financing is difficult at best on that end of it as well too. Last year we did put in a state bonding request for the Marsh and for Opus. There was no bonding bill last year, so that kind of went by the wayside at that point in time. We did submit another bonding request for this upcoming legislative session. And we've kind of shifted our priorities over to a fire station, hoping that maybe public safety gets a little better or harder look at a bonding or successful bonding campaign on that end of it, and then that would help us with his other projects as well too if we can get some state dollars on that end of it. And with state bonding dollars, there is a 50% match requirement, and so we are requesting $5.33 million from the state to help us rebuild that facility over at Fire Station 2. And so, so that would help on that end of it, but we are a long ways to go on that. We did have a bonding tour last week with the House Bonding Committee, so that was good to have them out. And so what else? And obviously, sales tax is always up in the air as well, too. There was a 2-year moratorium in place. That moratorium is now over. There's no new changes to laws or anything on sales tax, so you still have to receive legislative approval before you can bring it to a referendum vote on that end of it. And so, and who knows, the legislature may change something during session this year as well, too. So lots of things that are up in the air on that end of it. So that really leaves our financing option at this point in time with a property tax levy and a traditional bond issuance at this point in time. So looking at what we're doing, that $405,000 would be kind of that first step, but trying to save enough money. $405,000 times 2 would be about the principal and interest payments on a $10 million bond issuance, which would cover theoretically $4 million for the community center, $5 million plus for Fire Station 2 on that end of it. So a little bit of a savings account anyway to start with here and see what happens moving forward. So, and then we did call. You're probably aware it was council action earlier this fall. Late summer, early fall, where we called one of our park bonds with our last remaining park bond. We called that, and we had enough principal, or we had enough fund balance reserve in place to call that bond. And so we were able to save, we didn't save a whole lot, but we saved probably $10,000 in interest payments over the next 2 years. That was maturing pretty quickly, but we were able to realize some savings there anyway. Oh, and then I'll kick it over to Miranda.
Thanks, Jordan. Mike asked me, it's been a couple of years since we did our compensation study, so he asked if I could touch on how we do compensation and how we changed the method a few years ago. So in 2023, the city hired a consultant, David Drown Associates, they go by DDA, to conduct a compensation and classification study. For those of you who were on council that year, we had just come off of a pay equity report, and we passed by 1 point from the state. So that was kind of what drove us, a couple other factors to do this. But a classification and compensation study reviews internal equity. So it's a pay relationship between positions internally and external competitiveness, pay relationship with our labor market competitors. And our labor market competitors are our 10 peer cities that we use for our labor unions and many of our research studies. So as part of the process, the study consultants and HR, Sarah came at the very tail end of the project, review job descriptions and assign points for each classification as required by Minnesota pay equity law. So in Minnetonka, we went under this study for a variety of reasons. Again, be competitive in the market, ensure pay equity. That 1 point was really close for us. And then create a formalized pay structure. So prior to this, every single employee in the city of Minnetonka, outside of our unions, all of our non-union, were on different pay ranges. So we had zero consistency across the organization. So this was a significant project and a great improvement. Next slide, please.
Oh, sorry.
So compensation, what does this mean? So the implementation took effect for 2024 wages. So the end of 23 is when it went into implementation. So we did the initial market adjustments and COLA for the employees. We then, from there, had our scale developed with our grades in it, and then where the employee was on that initial market adjustment and COLA, we went to the next closest step in their new grade, is how we adjusted every single employee to get them into the pay grade. From there, annual percent market adjustments for the city's overall pay structure is a 4-year plan, so 2024 through 2027, which Darren just hit on. The COLA is approved by council each year, and then we knew this transition is very, very expensive and takes time, which is why we're spreading it over a course of many years. For the non-union pay structure, so again, we adopted a new non-union pay structure. It's a grade and grid system. Results of a compensation study by the external consultants. Again, we use external consultants to do this process for us and the study for us. The positions graded based on education, experience, budget responsibility, hazards, and more. So through this process, we had a lot of employees say, but I work extra hard, and it was a lot of the conversations of it's not about you and the job, it's about the job. Take the person out of the job and focus on the job description, so, and what it requires. And then considers market rates and expands the step system from 5 to 7. So prior, we had a 5-point step grade system. We now have a 7-grade system over a course of 5 years. Next, please. Again, our compensation goal at the end of this was the new pay structure is the outcome of the citywide compensation study that aims to ensure employees are compensated fairly and equitably for their work across the organization. Included a compensation review of our Minnetonka's previous pay structure in comparison to the market. Alignment with our local government's Pay Equity Act. That's every 3 years we have to submit that report. That does go through council prior to submission, and we do have to pass that. So it requires the city to establish a policy that all jobs are evaluated, given points according to level of knowledge and responsibility required to do the job. And we passed with flying colors this last time under this new plan, which was great. And then to stay competitive in the market. So Minnetonka's always sat at the 50 percentile. We are trying to move that needle a little bit forward. So we do every year, even though we're still in the middle of this implementation over the course of 4 years. This year we took a job out of each grade and we did compare it to the market just to make sure we are staying where we want to stay, as the salary cap was removed the year after we did that, and we know the significance that that has caused throughout our peer cities as well. So although we are still implementing, we are checking where we are at in the market, and we're in a really good spot with most of our positions. So we don't want to lag behind again to have to do a catch-up. So we are staying diligent about making sure we check those and making sure the plan is affordable along the way. So I have compensation.
Okay, good.
You want to just pause there?
Well,
quickly?
I'll just ask for council, any questions that you have on this. I mean, it's clearly a big area. I think, as Miranda indicated, we've kind of reset the bar and we're in a good spot, but it was a big deal. So any questions anyone has?
I don't have any questions, but I would just say that, there's some people in the community that have been paying close attention to our budget, and I think the point that Miranda made about how we passed by 1 point because the system that we had wasn't consistent across the staff. And I'd say also that where I work, we also just went to a 7-step system, and it's a huge adjustment. It's a lot of work for payroll and just to keep track and sort of learn how people fall, like when you're hiring and things like that. So it's a lot of work, and but it is so good to be consistent, and I know that this is going to serve the city really well in our recruitment efforts. And what people in the community often don't understand is you have to be competitive. We always strive for excellence here in the city, and that means we need to have good staff, and to have good staff, to attract good staff, to even get people to apply. You have to meet a certain compensation level, and so just the fact that we're in the middle still, that's a good thing, and so I'm glad you're keeping an eye on it. It's a lot to juggle, finding that sweet spot.
Yep. Paul, do you have a comment?
Oh, yeah, quick follow-up. That's pretty much what I was going to say, but I did want to say one thing is that, we want to be competitive and draw people. Luckily, it seems like to me, and others can agree or disagree, but we're able to attract really high-quality staff because we have a good work culture. But we can't rely just on that. We do have to, kind of have consistency and have, kind of like you said, that equitable compensation package across the board, so people know that they're getting into a process or a system where they're going to be compensated fairly for their growth and development in the long term. So I think this will do that. So, kind of providing for this to attract people, and then luckily we have a culture, even if we're not the highest paid, going in, if we're mid-pack, they know that there's room for growth, and then also just kind of the culture here in our city is luckily something that I think helps retain people. Staff can disagree, I'm not going to disagree right now.
We're not going to put them on the spot. Rebecca.
Yeah, so thank you for that, because I know it's a lot of work.
Rebecca.
Thanks, Brad. So back as Perry was leaving, we had a big pay recalibration at that point. And, you know, and it's, so that was about, what, 6 or 7 years ago? And not that things don't change, and obviously we've been in a really, wages have been very have gone up a lot in that period of time across the board. So I recognize that. I worry a little bit about, like, I mean, I agree, paying people that are good the right amount so that they stay is far better than turnover, 100%. There is a little bit of like a dog or tail wagging the dog scenario. If we're not, I mean, are we, to the point that came up in one of the comments in Minnetonka Matters, which is, you know, if every city's doing something different in how they're dealing with this, and I think probably the clearest example is some of what we're seeing in police hiring and bonuses, and, you know, it's just going to be this inflationary pressure that where's the ceiling on that? Are we communicating with our peer cities and kind of trying to, we don't want to collude with them, but emulate, make sure that people are kind of managing, because you see the school districts often have steps and they have a lot of similarities. But is every city just doing this a different way, and is that kind of putting pressure on wages?
Can you, thank you. Can you
I think.
Yeah, right.
Can you clarify what every city doing it a different way?
Well, I mean, is there any consistency in how we see this, maybe even when we look at the greater budget, how pay structure is, or a budget is developed is different in Eden Prairie than it is in Minnetonka, and different employees are classified under different categories, and it's very hard to kind of understand, compare apples to apples. It's oftentimes like apples to bananas in how a city planner position might be looked at, right? I'm just curious. I mean, I don't expect you to have the answer, but I do think about that, in that is wage pressure being created by Blaine is doing something completely different than us, and that is driving our wages up across the board. And I don't want to be critical of wages. People deserve to be paid for their work. I just, you know, having in mind that we made this huge levy increase as a result of the wage study just 6 or 7 years ago, and then we're kind of revisiting it again, I am a little worried. I don't want to be 3 years from now and say, oh, yep, we need to take this hit again.
Thanks for the clarity. I wasn't here in I started in 2019, so it was before that, so whatever, 2017.
It's a while back.
Yeah, so that you're right. There was, for those that were not on the council, there was a shift when that happened. I think 2017 or 2018 rings a bell, maybe somewhere in there, where the way that the city was calculating wages is much different than the process we just went through. What I would say today is we're actually in alignment now with cities. The way that Minnetonka had been calculating compensation was drastically different than the norm. And so what happened back then was an adjustment. You're correct, was an adjustment. What this did is actually do a full-blown compensation study. Because the way that wages were calculated previously was the city staff. The city staff was, in essence, doing our own in-house calculations And so our in-house HR staff every year was doing what I call a mini, extremely time-consuming mini salary survey. So we were reaching out, our staff was reaching out to peer cities, pulling data from other cities, data practice requests, trying to do and we were fairly good at it in some ways because we were meeting our pay equity law. And I'll come back to pay equity here in a second. And so the way that we were doing it was not, we didn't have a compensation plan in place. It was, we were doing a compensation research and trying to determine what the city clerk in our 10 peer cities was getting paid to our city clerk. And then there is this back end spreadsheet that if a job title was different from a job title, because some cities had different job titles, might have nothing comes to mind here on the spot, but we have, let's think of a staff member like a GIS technician might be called something else in another city. And so our HR staff was like, well, we don't have a GIS person in this city, but they have someone that's called this, and it's similar job descriptions. Here's their pay. And so there is this real difficult way of trying to calculate comparable wages. And so the adjustments that were done back then didn't address a compensation system, putting a real system in place. It was mainly doing research and trying to position ourselves at the 50th percentile as best as we could. And we did okay at that. Part of that adjustment back then, Rebecca, was when we say we're, at that time, the employees were being placed at the 50th percentile, is the 50th percentile of the actual employee's wage, not the max of their range. Meaning, I'll use a city clerk as an example. So that's an easy position because every city has a city clerk. And so if a city clerk was in Plymouth, was there for 2 years, that's different than a city clerk that's been in a position for 10 years. Their compensation would look different. So we were making some calculations at that time where the city was making calculations based on the pay of that person on that given day. And so we shifted away from that back in 2017-18, which did have, yes, some investments made to the city. That was helpful because we would be in a much worse position if we had not done that. What this did is brought someone in, an independent set of eyes, to do what we call a full-blown compensation study, where the consultant spent 6 months. I mean, it's a heavy project to really understand every position in our city, compare those positions to our peer cities, come up with a point system, put them in grades. That wasn't done before.
So this should keep us from having this sticker shock.
Yes,
in the
this
future.
gets us on a trajectory where you won't hear from me again saying we need to make some big adjustments, because that's what's happening now, to make sure that we're positioned long-term.
Patsy?
So, okay, and so, because a lot of it is, well, the cost of living is 3%, but the city staff budget is going up 5 to 8%. So in order to explain that, then I would say, well, what? Like, what, so what I understand, I mean, because that's the thing, like, 7 stages, so I feel sort of stupid about it, but, like, simply, what does that mean, sort of? Are we catching up? I mean, does even that question, I mean, like, I'm so stupid, I can't even, like, ask the right question. Because I know it's more complicated than that, but how would you explain it more simply? Or is there a way? Other than, my understanding is we're all adjusting to the different stages, right? So if I work a certain amount of years, then I progress to these different stages, and so the budget for that has to accommodate that change. Do you know what I mean? Feels like I'm not getting it.
No, these are, well, that's a good question. Should we pull up that grade?
Yeah, we can.
Sorry.
So, no, this is, I want you to make sure you understand, because there's a lot of moving pieces to compensation. Before I pull up a graphic, just to give you an illustration of what that means. First off, first let me just go to this again. Oops, too many mouses. So going back to what we had shared earlier. So even,
Right.
so we say, well, before, let me say it this way. There are three components to compensation, to an increase in compensation. Right now, there are three pieces. There's what we call cost of living. That's, I think everyone's familiar with cost of living.
Mhm.
And so there's a cost of living component that's recommended at 3%. Right now, with our union contracts, we have an obligation with our union employees in 2026 of 3%. That generally then drives what we pay non-union employees in terms of COLA. So whether it's union or non-union, we are looking at a 3% cost of living adjustment for union and non-union employees. That's one component. The second component is called this market. So how does the staff fit into markets, into the external markets? That's the second piece. And then the final piece is this positioning within the marketplace. As Miranda mentioned, a 4-year process to go from the 50th percentile.
Right,
Because we have been, as a city, philosophically positioned at the 50th percentile,
right.
which is similar to average. You know, it's a different calculation, but 50th percentile is in the middle of our peer cities. So half our peer cities would be less and half our peer cities would be more. And so trying to be in that competitive state, moving to the 60th percentile. We're seeing our neighboring cities moving to the 75th percentile. So if we weren't able to, if we don't do that, moving to the 60th percentile, then we will be continuing to fall behind. So that's a challenge. So those are the three components right now. Once we get movement to the 60th percentile, which Miranda explained it would be after 2027, then there's two components to then wage increases. It's cost of living and then market / kind of that step increase. And let me explain what that looks like in this illustration. Might need the mouse. Yeah. So I'm going to pull out of, we had this ready to go. Thought maybe this might come up. So it's at the very end, Miranda.
Okay.
Should have been right there. Oh.
This one, right?
Oh, can you pull up, maybe, or can you maybe just pull up, is it the union, like the firefighter contract?
Oh, yeah, we can do that too. I'll pull this up while I get that up.
What's that?
I'll grab it quick.
So we'll just pull up a union contract to give you a sense of what we mean by the grade system, the wage system and grade system. While Miranda's doing that, this gives you a sense in 2026, that base increase of 3% plus market. And the market is calculated depending on the employee group, that external market comparables. So with police officers in 2026, their compensation is 4.68 because of, again, base is that blue piece of it, and then the market comparables. So for example, in the union contract for police officers, there's a formula that determines what market is. So we're very prescribed in compensation for police officers. We're also very prescribed in police sergeants. Based on that calculation in the union contract, their base is 3%. The market increase for police sergeants is 2.27.
It's 1%. It's 1%. I don't know why it didn't change. It's 1%.
Yeah.
1%?
I was going to say those numbers didn't add.
Yeah.
Those numbers don't
It's
add up.
1%.
1%. So error on that, sorry, apologies. So 1% is the market increase, so total percent for police sergeants of 4%. Local 49 is basically our public works staff. Based on their union contract, 3% again, cost of living, and for their market is 2.08%, so a factor of a total adjustment of 508. Firefighters, again, I don't need to walk it through that specific, you get the math, 5% for firefighters, and then non-union, average is about 5%. Why is there nuances? Why is it just an average? Not one employee gets the same increase every year. That's why every employee is going to get the base 3% COLA, but then there's the other factors that determine exactly what that increase will be.
And Rebecca, I would say the 3 unions up there, so the officers, sergeants, and 49ers, They are still on that method that was implemented in 2018. I'll pull this back up. Give me 1 second, Mike.
So we'll pull up just to give an example of like how steps come into play. And I'll start to verbalize it as we're on there. Sorry, Kevin, but I just mentioned fire. And this holds true, it doesn't matter which union it is or if it's a non-union. This gives you a sense of what we mean by a step system.
Thank you.
I was just saying.
And we've seen this too, haven't we?
Can you go to like this fire, go up?
Oh, sorry. That's what I meant to do. Here's your text.
So fire technician. So this is a fire technician's a firefighter. So in practice, we get a 7-step system. How this plays out is a fire technician or firefighter is hired. They start at step 1. After 6 months on the job, there's a performance evaluation. If they're meeting satisfactory performance, they would go to step 2 in 6 months. On their anniversary date, they would land at step 3. And then every year after that, they would move up a step until they get to step 7. So looking at that as an hourly rate for a fire technician, they would start at $41. We go up 3 decimal points, $47.374. After 5 years, they would be at $49.40 an hour. And so now how does the cost of living come into play with all this? So cost of living comes into play basically January 1st of every year. So when we turn the page to a fiscal year, which is a calendar year, that cost of living increase would come into play. So for example, if it's a brand new firefighter, they start in, let's say they just started today, they would be paid $41.37. Flip of the calendar, that whole grade, that whole thing shifts 3%. That's the cost of living. So in the beginning of the calendar year, they're going to go from $41.37, add 3% onto that. That's the cost of living shift. That's the shifting of the whole thing. It also shifts because of the 2%, as we go from the 50th percentile to the 60th percentile in 4 years, there's a shift of also 2% because we're trying to position ourselves higher in the marketplace. So there's a shift there. And then 6 months, so if they're hired today, 6 months from now, they would go to $42.61. Now it's not $42.61 because you've already, because everything's shifted.
X%, yep.
So they're going to get the cost of living, they're going to get the market, and they're going to get that step increase. And that's how it plays out with all employees with the grade step system. Now what's important to say in this is that the theory of all of this is that when a new employee is hired, and we'll use firefighter again as an example, they're at the greenest point of their career. They're coming in with little experience. And so the idea of progressing them up the scale is that after 5 years, that employee should be at their highest proficiency. So that doesn't matter if they're a 5-year employee at that point or a 20-year employee, they should be at their greatest proficiency. So after 5 years, let's say let's project 5 years from now, and the city does a cost of living of 3%, that's what they would get is 3%.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's an employee that's been with the city less than 5 years, there's greater advancement, greater percentage increases until you get to the top of your range, or the terminology we use is you get to step 7, you're at the top of your range, you're not eligible for any other adjustments other than a
COLA.
cost of living.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Is
this
that-
is helpful.
So-
Thanks a lot.
Mike, if you don't mind, if I can add a little color to where we were before there were a couple of things happening before we did that significant increase a number of years ago. Because we had a very experienced workforce. We had people who'd been here a long time. and we had a good culture. People liked working here. So when you get to a certain point in your career, if you like working where you're working and your job is secure, you're not really looking around for other work. You realize, okay, this is where I'm going to retire from probably. And so we went through a number of retirements. And then we went to hire in the marketplace, and we found we were not competitive. And we found that our employees stuck around because it was a good place to work and they didn't have any complaints. And yeah, maybe they could have gone, they weren't going to leave to go get paid more. And so we, for whatever reason, I mean, we saved taxpayers quite a bit of money in doing that, but it wasn't intentional, but we did get behind. And the point that, I mean, it's really important that we've done the work that we've done because, one, there is no free lunch. I mean, you do have to catch up at some point. And when you have to do a big jump in a year, you wonder why you get a big levy increase. Well, it's when you haven't been, I don't want to say you've been asleep at the switch, but you haven't kept pace, and you're going to have to catch up at some point, and that's expensive. And so all of a sudden you have a double-digit, levy increase because all of your employees need to be caught up. And so, being objective. Now, admittedly, I mean, if you had some of those years where you were underpaying your people and getting away with it, you were saving taxpayer money. There's no question about that. But you were really kind of stealing from from your employees to do that. And most employees won't stick in their head in the sand that long. So, I mean, staying current is really in the best interest, not only of the city, but of our residents and taxpayers, because it keeps things more consistent, more projectable. So I think I'm largely correct on the analysis, but we discovered a problem because we had a lot of retirements and we were not competitive in the marketplace.
We had a lot of retirements, and the generation following that generation of people has fewer people.
That's true too.
So it made it even more competitive, and working for another municipality, it's very challenging if you don't have competitive wages. And and I know that we still have the same issue here in certain job titles. It's just very hard to find people that are qualified and specialized, I think assessments and building inspectors and, that kind of thing. And, or even in accounting, it got really competitive to find good accountants. Or, and there was a short time where it was really hard to find good mechanics. That can be really hard because you're competing with the private sector for some of those things as well. So what the mayor's saying is important, and a lot of people that are just looking at the numbers and the bottom line, there are other dynamics at play, which is not just the financial numbers, but sort of how do you build human capital if you don't have the financial capital to pay them.
So Darren and Miranda, take us to a point where we're at a good spot for a break, because we're 2 hours in and I thought maybe a break would be good.
Yeah, I think we can take a break here. If I could make one more
Yep,
just
go ahead.
comment. I don't know if this will resonate. Can we go back to that firefighter example? And I would submit to you, council, in a way, this system, while it does, in the early years of an employee's career here at the city, yes, there are bigger increases. If you want to just do an analysis by percentages, absolutely, there are bigger percentages for an employee in the early years of their time in the city. I would submit to you that actually is money savings. If you step away from that and apply what often happens, I think, in the private sector, and that is, if they're gonna hire a firefighter, you hire firefighter. It doesn't matter if it's 6 months worth of experience, 10 years of experience, 20 years of experience, you hire someone and then you just pay them $49 an hour. We're not paying $49 an hour for
Inexperience.
We're actually paying them less than that, and they step into, and they advance into that pay grade to get to that full experience. And so in a way, our compensation system is set up that we're not treating all employees equally in a way. We're treating them based on experience, and we pay them and compensate them as such.
All right, any questions quickly? Yes,
So in some ways, this is kind of reminding me of the civil service, you know, the steps and levels and things like that. It's not dissimilar, so in some way, like you said, it's kind of systematizing instead of a much more ad hoc system, which I think, you know, sounds reasonable. I did just a couple of quick questions. Is there room in this step system for, like, you know, you said after 7 years, you know, you kind of, I don't know, I mean, is there thought about retention issues beyond that? And also, is there a merit pay element to the step system?
There is, I'm sorry, I'll just start and chime in, Miranda. To that point, when we get to union negotiations, the union, there has been requests when we get asks of the unions to consider longevity. So like a longevity type component. From a management perspective, we've advocated against that. But yes, that does become a point of conversation, and especially union negotiations, to recognize who you're correct. After 5 years, you get an employee will get cost of living. That's what you're eligible for. And so long-standing employees will say, well, I've been here for 25 years, and so, yes. Anything to add to that?
No, you're right.
but you get that nice pin.
I was gonna say, you get a watch or
You get a
something.
watch.
We don't do watches, but we do nice pins.
Coffee maker.
But there is, because beyond the 5 years, there, to answer your question more specifically, there's not a compensation element beyond the 5 years.
Okay, and then the merit, you said that is part of the step system as well for non-union?
So we have a merit, we have a merit system here at the city for non-union employees, and they're eligible to up to a 2.5% merit pay element. So we have a whole policy on it. For non-union, it's up to 2.5%, and then it's different for each of the unions. That was negotiated separately for the unions.
And then, I'm sorry, just one last quick question is there, you said that you know, you kind of have in the past compared to peer cities, and now, you know, hopefully we're gonna be, I'm sure there'll still be an element of that in there. Do you ever do comparisons to similar work in the private sector? Is that ever looked at?
We do not.
Okay, just curious, thanks.
All right, anything else? Or a break? So let's take, it's 8 o'clock, let's take about a 7-minute break and I'll visit what we need to visit. Everyone, we're gonna start back up. So, you've got the recording on? All right, Darren, take it away.
Very good, thank you. So that was a great conversation on that piece of the budget. I want to get back to a little bit more of the funds, talking a little bit about this. So these are a couple slides you probably haven't seen before. I've kind of put these in to kind of look at the fund types here and look at the actuals to budget, and then do a little bit of the comparison here, just specifically here for the general fund as well. So if you look at the general fund and we look at the 2026 budget column, and these are pages out of your budget book. You look at the 2026 budget, we have revenues of $60.2 million or so. Expenditures equaling at about $60.1 million. We have a little bit of a surplus there of $78,200. If you follow that down, we have a transfer to other funds of $78,200. That's kind of an accounting deal that we have to do for a transfer over to the Community Investment Fund for payment of the Minnetonka music facility over at the high school that we purchased a number of years ago on that end of it. So, so basically, it's a balanced budget within your general fund. The $2.5 million transfer to capital projects. That's what we talked a little bit about earlier, where that's your transfer out to your CIP-related funds using the excess reserves that we have in place. And so that was a substantial number that allowed us to reduce the CIP levy for 2026. Just highlighting a couple of the numbers over on the right on the changes from 25 to from the 25 budget to 26 budget. On the revenue side of it, everything's fairly consistent on that end of it. The user fees are up a little bit. There we have some additional I know we had some additional recreation programming that we increased, that we were seeing some good numbers in, and so we increased the revenues on there, and obviously we have some expenditures then that offset that as well too, on that end of it. And we're expecting, talking with Julie, and we monitor these very closely as she will adhere to, is that we look at the license and permit revenue on a very regular basis and try to make sure we have a good calculation for 2026. We're conservative on it, but we don't want to be ultra conservative on that. We want to make sure that we got a realistic number in there, because that all goes into plugging what the levy is on that end of it. Looking a little bit at the expenditures, I'll just touch on them quickly there. So looking at your general government expenditures, so that'll include city administrator or city manager, finance, assessing, HR, those types of services there. There we're seeing an increase of about $828,000 or 9%. There's some things happening there. So we had the public information officer over in the police department. We hired that position in 25 or 24, 25 I believe it is. And that was housed in the police department. And so we're transitioning that employee over to the communications division on that end of it. So there's no new employees there, but we are transitioning that employee over to the communications division, which is under the general government category at that point. And then also in 26, we'll have a general election as well too. And so we'll have increased election expenditures related to election judges, those types of things. That's about $175,000 or so on that end of it and such. And so between those couple things, I think there was one other adjustment staffing wise that I can't remember, but it was those kind of main things that were just a reclassification that was causing a little bit of an increase there. Obviously, public safety, the my eyes are getting goofy here, $3.3 million. That's really the public safety master plan there along. Obviously, we got the one new community engagement officer. We got the second half of the 9 full-time firefighters being hired in there, and so that accounts for the rest of it there. And the rest of them are all kind of fall into that kind of a normal 2 to 5%, 6 or 7% increase on that end of it. Recreation is a little bit higher, obviously related to the recreation programming mentioned above with the additional programming happening. So that leaves us then, so that's a little bit of the general fund, and then I'll quickly go into the special revenue funds, and kind of highlighted in these gray highlights here. I wanted to highlight the ice arena and the marsh, and so this is the first year that we're setting a levy for those funds, and so we want to kind of draw those out and show you kind of the bottom line of what we're looking at for both of those funds. And so if you look at the ice arena fund, we got $1.2 million of revenues coming in, 1.22, and then we have expenditures of 1.284 going out, and then we have another transfer out of about $36,000. Leaves us about $100,000 short of our kind of a deficit for 2026. We are expecting that to occur for 26 because we are replacing the refrigeration system in Ring B, and so our revenues will be down slightly. That'll be out of commission for 3, 4, 5 months on that end of it, so we'll miss out on some revenues associated with ice rental, those types of things. We'll probably have some savings on some temporary staffing, those types of things on that end of it, but we are expecting a little bit bigger of a operating loss for 26 with the ice arena fund on that end of it. And then looking at the marsh, there we also have $200,000 budgeted as general property taxes. When we purchased the marsh, we purchased it for the purchase price, and then we also allocated a $2 million kind of operating subsidy to help us get through the first couple of years, we thought, of operations on that end of it. When we look at the revenues coming in, we got about $2.1 million, and we got about $2.3 million of expenditure. So we're, even with that general property tax levy there, we're about $230,000 or so short of making that break-even point. If you follow that down further, you get to the very bottom line, there's a negative $1.5 million. So that's where we will be at projected-wise at the end of 2026. That says, okay, of that $2 million, we got about 1.5 that would be used up of that operating subsidy. And so as we continue to look forward for potential renovations, improvements to increased operations at the marsh, we'll continue to work on those numbers at that point in time as well. So just wanted to highlight those couple funds there. The other ones across the border are kind of a hodgepodge of funds. That's why they call them a special revenue, because they all got kind of unique funding sources for the most part. So I'm going to skip this one and come back to it, and then just point out the capital project funds is that other group that Mike talked about that also has property taxes with it. And so if you look at the gray horizontal line across there, the general property taxes, and you look at the very far right column, $9.3 million, that's the amount that we're levying for our CIP funds. And so each one of those columns makes up, is a different fund type that is responsible for that portion of the levy on that end of it. Capital project funds really ebb and flow with looking at their fund balances. You can have a project one year, then you may not have a project for a couple of years, those types of things. And so you may have a deficit one year, and then you work your way out of it for the next couple of years to get enough funds to do the next project on that end of it. So seeing a deficit there isn't the end of the world. We just have a plan to, in the long range, to get that back into a positive state at that point in time. And so just going back to the enterprise funds, and these are the ones that act like a business. So these are the ones that, if anything was to mirror what a business looked like, these would be the enterprise fund areas. And so our water and sewer utilities, we talked a lot about that at the last study session about the rates, kind of what we need for an estimated ending cash balance, those types of things. For enterprise funds, we really like to try to focus, to make it simple, is looking at the cash balance of an enterprise fund, because enterprise funds have depreciation. Depreciation is a non-cash item, but yet you expend money every year for capital outlay. Well, that capital outlay is a cash going out the door, but in reality, it's an asset. So you expense it, and then you move it over to it as an asset, but there's no cash associated with that. So you try to make it kind of the easiest possible comparison between governmental funds. Using that available cash balances kind of helps with making that connection on those there. And there you can see we got some of our other kind of recreation funds as well to the Wilson Fitness Center. You can see our net change in position there. We're about $268,000 kind of short of breaking even. The Wilson Center itself has paid for all of its capital outlay since probably the major remodel back in 2012, that was, or 10, somewhere in that ballpark. All the capital improvements have all been paid for by the Wilson Center itself on that end of it. And Kelly and his staff do a good job of kind of looking and seeing where their cash balance is before moving forward with the capital project as well too. So if they look and see how the year is going, depending upon and what costs come in for a capital project and those types of things, but does a good job of managing that on a year-by-year basis as well. And then we will look at, when we get into the rates as well too, you'll see the environmental fund there. That's the environmental recycling fund. That has a negative cash position. There are reasons for that, mainly related to organic recycling that we will address here in a few minutes. So just wanted to
Everyone's
touch.
favorite topic.
Right.
Yay.
So any questions on any of those funds, and I'll keep it moving.
So just a minute more for Mr. Day. So for the Marsh, are we anticipating membership continuing to grow to where we get to where it's paying for itself? Or are we considering perhaps doing a slight increase in membership fees?
I would say both. I think membership has continued to grow. I think we're seeing membership grow at about 2.5% per month. So we're still adding members, but we're not quite to that break-even point. So I think it's a combination of both adding members and also increasing membership fees. We did that here in January of 2025 and plan to do so, every year or every 2 years. Pricing strategy was a tough, when we first started, and we wanted to be affordable and accessible.
Right.
But yes, both.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Sounds good. And I'll keep
Kimberly,
moving.
thank you for asking that question.
Yep, thank you. And I'll keep moving on here. But also part of this, to show you these different fund types and all the funds that are within there, and how big our budget is, of how many different kind of business units or business sectors there really are within the operations of the city as well too. So you can see in the special revenue funds we have, what do we got there, 8, 9, 10 of them on that end of it. So that's just in that category. So. All right, keeping it moving here. So homeowner impacts. We have seen a shift a little bit over the last couple of years with single-family homes or single household homes seeing a little bit bigger tax burden, and that being shifted away from kind of the commercial area. This last year, apartments actually had overall had a decrease in value as well too. We're seeing that kind of stabilize again as well too. So I don't know that I would numbers aren't officially out yet, but I would assume that that'll come back a little bit and be a little bit more closer to showing some growth there, I would think, versus being a negative number at this point. But still preliminary. So we are seeing what the impact of our tax levy is. We did reduce the proposed tax levy is going to be slightly smaller than the preliminary levy. That didn't change our numbers a whole lot. It really changed the median home value, that went from like $169 to $168, so it really didn't change it much, but it did change it a little bit. This is all information you've seen before, so you let me if you had any questions, otherwise I'll kind of keep moving through here. And I would say that our commercial sectors are in better shape than what we are seeing in some of the bigger metropolitan, like Minneapolis, St. Paul area. On that end of it, we're sitting in a good position. We're not losing occupants to that end of it, and our values are
Hanging in
there
Yeah.
as best as they can on that end of it. They're not seeing 20%, 25% decreases on that end of it, but we're seeing some of the smaller being maybe subdivided a little bit on some of the major Class A properties and those types of things. So, so overall, pretty solid still.
And, just a quick comment on that. I mean, other than Lakeshore and to a lesser degree, single family, I mean, it's pretty consistent across the board. I mean, there aren't huge swings in our property classes, and but I do think that some of our single family and they're feeling it a little bit more because they're picking up an increasing piece of the burden. So when we talk about a levy percent, there's a lot of homeowners, single family and Lakeshore homeowners are going to the levy increase is going to be felt greater by them because they're taking on a greater share of the tax burden.
For sure, and even if you're just 1% or 2% on that side of that, say if you're that 4.1%, there's a big difference between being at 3%, even compared to being at 5%. You'll see,
Right.
Quite a bit less of that increase on the 3% versus
Yeah.
you'll at the 5% on that end of it. So
Yeah.
every property is unique on that end of it. These are the averages across the city, but it's really dependent upon each one of those properties on that end of it. So. And here's just another chart of how that shifting is happening. We can see the residential, the blue section there is increasing over the last couple of years, and you got that gray part, that's the commercial industrial, that's shrinking, and so really that's that tax burden shifting away from that sector and moving it to the residential and to the apartments to a certain extent as well too, and such. So. HRA levy, that is still status quo, $300,000. It hasn't changed all year long on that end of it. So I think we have our programs identified and plans for those dollars. Our communication and feedback. So this is a project on the Minnetonka Matters website as well within the city. We regularly put this out in the Minnetonka Memo, social media, those types of things. Are all out there and trying to get our budget message out there as best as we can. Minnetonka Matters is one of our main areas to send out information on the budget, and so we've had 425 site visits this year. Last year's the first year that we did this, and the number was very similar. It was 416 or something of that nature, so it was very similar on that end of it. The number of comments that we received this year so far is down compared to last year. I would expect that we'll probably get some more in between now and December 7th or 8th on that end of it, and we'll make sure to share those with the council as well too. So, and then just with that, public meeting for the budget, so that'll be the opportunity for the public to weigh in on the budget. Will be on December 8th at that 6 o'clock city council meeting on that end of it. So, those are just some of our different communication channels. And that brings us to the end of the budget portion of tonight's presentation on that end of it. And we got a few more to follow on this one, but this is the budget piece of it. So,
all right,
those are the questions that are posed in the council report on the levy and the support, and look for any feedback you may have. So,
all right, council, this is our opportunity, and you saw these questions as part of the packet, but. I mean, the big question on the top is, okay, our base property tax levy increase of 7.2%. of which includes 2.7% for the Public Safety Master Plan, which we've talked about numerous times in the past. And then there's the extra 0.7, which takes it to 7.9% in total. And those are for improvements to our facilities, both the community center and fire station number 2. And then finally, the HRA levy, which has been flat for quite a number of years. So your opportunity to comment or ask questions. And it's not the first time you've seen it, but go ahead, Rebecca.
You know, I think that we always say it makes us uncomfortable, right? This number makes me uncomfortable. I prefer not to see it. I think the tough question, and I'm supportive of the budget as it stands. We've worked hard to get to here. You know, what if we want to look at in the future how, and talked to Mike about this a little bit this morning, how to bring that levy increase down in the out years. We as a council have to, and as a community, would have to be considering what we're willing to give up in a concrete way. You know, so potentially, and we don't have to get into it now, but potentially that involves, you know, community engagement. If that is our, you know, if that is ultimately our goal, is to bring the levy down. Do we want slower plowing efficiency? I mean, the real meaningful ways that affect people. Do we want less in senior services? Do we want to, you know, eliminate programming? Those are the ways that we would bring the levy down. This council doesn't, and rightfully so, have an appetite for that. So with that, you know, our choice then is to support the levy, and I'm prepared to do that.
Thank you for that. Deb?
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with all that. Also, I know that we are shifting to priority-based budgeting, and I have high hopes that that new system will help us find efficiencies that, you know, that were the reason that we even are considering migrating to that kind of budgeting. I mean, we went to presentations at the National League and made a lot of sense, and it seemed like it might be a way to find those savings in an atmosphere where it's extremely hard to stop the sort of onslaught of inflationary pressures. So anyway, that's, you know, I agree with everything that Rebecca said. I too, you know, in spite of the pain, and, you know, all of us here we are levying ourselves along with everyone else. And my husband is a retiree. But I do really hope that the new budgeting system will help us keep things at a dull roar.
All right, other comments, council members? Anyone? Paula?
First of all, thank you. This was a really helpful presentation, I think, you know, both for council and hopefully for residents here and maybe listening live or a recording later. I guess the only thing that I would say is that, echoing my colleagues' comments, is that the only way that I can see to significantly reduce this budget would be to forego the public safety master plan, and we've already committed to that. So, I mean, I think everything else would be shaving along the margins. That's just, you know, where we're at. There are other cities who are, a couple of cities, peer cities or surrounding cities who are lower than us. They are probably going to be moving into public safety master plans, as we've talked about, in the next couple of years. So they are going to be going through this, and I think another mitigating factor that we don't talk about, or we didn't talk about tonight, but we've talked about other times, is that we are, you know, what we're facing in terms of capital expenses for our streets and our water and sewer as an aging city, an older city than some of our, you know, Maple Grove or Eden Prairie or some of the newer suburbs, those are things that we're having to invest in and will continue to have to invest in. So while, hopefully priority-based budgeting will help us, find efficiencies and things like that, I just think we also have to be kind of cognizant of the fact that, we are gonna have to continue to make investments in the city, just based on having to replace so many systems. And we've talked about that at other previous study sessions and elsewhere, that we're looking at that for the long term. So I think, having combed through this budget really over the last week, like I said, there's not fat in here. So I appreciate that, and it's uncomfortable, but this is where we're at. Well, I was talking to Mike about how there is another state that does things differently in that, and I'm not advocating for this in Minnesota. From taking off my city council hat and putting on my resident hat, I think it's Michigan and a few other states that as long as you stay in the home, your property taxable market value is capped at either at inflation or some other number, that it can't go higher. It's not exactly rent control, but kind of a similar thing, and then it resets if you move. And whether you do that or whether we have some of the programs, I don't know, but this could be something that we have to start thinking about, talking to our state electeds about too, in terms of how property taxes. I hope residents remember that the state kind of imposes the classes, whether you're lakeshore, whether you're single family, that's imposed at the state level. That's not something that the city council has the ability to influence, much less the fact that we are about 30% of a homeowner's actual tax, that there's other governing jurisdictions who are also out there raising their levies as well. So, long way of saying thanks for the work, not a lot of fat, not thrilled with it, but not jumping on my jumping up and down to pay more taxes, but this is where we're at if we're going to sustain our community. So thanks for the work.
Other comments, anyone? Seeing no one.
And before
You
you
go
comment,
ahead.
real quick,
Yep.
sorry, I should have mentioned, I'm remiss, both, I think you and I are remiss in talking about priority-based budgeting. And I think I've had a couple of conversations with folks today on that. This process will look a little different next year. When I say this process, meaning the rewind or fast forward, and we turn the page into 2026, and we start as a city working on our 27 budget. And even though that doesn't seem that far away, it'll be, before you know it, we'll be in our budget season next spring. We will be bringing in and weaving in priority-based budgeting. I think we're proud of the fact that we're one of, right now, I think only 2 cities in Minnesota that are going through this process. Bloomington is the other one. They're a little ahead of us on that front. Behind the scenes, I can tell you that we're working on that, and we're gearing up for this conversation with council next spring. What's happening, excuse me, behind the scenes right now is we're working with directors. Directors are identifying those programs because it's a new approach to really dissecting our budget a different way. And council, I know you know this, but again, for those that will be listening in, when we talk about priority-based budgeting, it's going to take a look at our expenditures as they exist today. We'll have a similar budget as it exists today, because there are budgeting principles that we have to adhere to in terms of our line items and how it's laid out, all part of GFOA requirements and best practices, so that won't change. But we'll be reshuffling the expenditures in a way that puts expenditures into a program. An example that I've maybe used before, and I'll say it again here tonight, is, let's see, we've been not talking about police today, so we'll talk about police. Hi, Scott. If you look at the police budget, we have a police budget. And with the police budget, it's like every other departmental budget where you have a line item for salaries. You have a line item for insurance. You have a line item for all the expenditures for that department. What priority-based budgeting will do, for example, we'll take a look at police and be more specific on how much do we spend on patrol? How much do we spend on investigations? How much do we spend on, kind of fill in the blank? So it looks at programming that way. Another example is public works. How much do we spend on snow plowing? How much do we spend on road repairs? So to really kind of break down the expenditures in a more cohesive way. where then we can really reflect those programming to our strategic plan, and really just to understand exactly where the dollars are going, be able to make, I think, more intelligent decisions on what's important to the city. Do we need to shift funds from one to another? Maybe there's something we need to end. I think that's always a conversation that we have at a staff level. You've brought it up as well, Council, in terms of, are there things we're doing today that we shouldn't be doing? And I think through that process, we'll be able to better identify what that looks like. So we're excited about that, and this will be part of the conversation next year.
Thank you.
So thank you for letting me jump in.
No, that's good. Again, anyone else want to comment? Otherwise, I'll try and comment briefly on the discussion questions. First of all, thank you. I mean, we've been working on this for a long time. A lot of time and effort goes into budgeting. We don't take it lightly, and I think we all have we've had the budget book for a while. We've had the resources to understand what's going on. As I talked to Mike, in anticipation of this meeting, we're talking. I would love to say, well, gee, between now and our open forum in December, that we could maybe knock off, a few tenths of the budget. I always hope to do that, but I will say that I observe what happens in other cities, and there's some cities that come in with a preliminary levy of 12%, and everybody's hair is on fire, and somehow, some way, they manage to bring the budget in at 7%. And they cut 30 or 40 or 50% of what they said they were going to levy. And that's, in my time here, that's never been the way we've done it in Minnetonka. We've always been quite realistic. When we put a preliminary levy in, it comes down a little bit. The new numbers come in, the pencils get a little sharper, and we knock it down by, a tenth, maybe 15/100ths. I mean, and we do it tightly, and I think that's intellectually honest. I'm pleased that we do that. We don't fudge the numbers so the council can look like it's really demanding of staff, and then have a 30 or 40% drop. And I think that's bad. I think it's disingenuous, and so I like the way we do things. Now, I'd love to say, gee, I'd like to take that down to 5.5% if we had a path, but I think, as my fellow council members have indicated, our public safety master plan is something that we've committed to. I know that I believe in it, and we believe in it, and it's not just smoke and mirrors. There are things that definitely have to get done. It's not easy to recruit firefighters. We need full-time firefighters because we don't have enough paid-on-call firefighters. A big part of the public safety master plan is the improvements that we're going to have to make to our satellite fire stations, because they do not have housing for overnight staffing, and our public safety master plan says we need overnight staffing. That stuff isn't cheap, it's real, and we have to do it. So, I'm supportive of the 7.2%. If between now and December we could say, well, we could get away with 7.05% or whatever, I'd take that, but I'm not really expecting that. A couple of areas that I've asked Mike and staff to look at is we provide services to other cities, and we charge other cities for some of the services we provide, some of our neighboring communities. And I'd like to maybe take a harder look at that and say, is there any savings, or should we be charging more? We're not going to save it for this levy, but as we look ahead, are we charging enough for what we do for other cities? Because if we're not charging enough, essentially we're having our taxpayers pay for services to other cities. I don't think we want to do that. We want to pay we want them to cover their costs, or we want to cover our costs. I know one, for example, that I think we do not charge enough for is for school board elections. I believe we do not charge very much to the school districts for which we do elections. So essentially, we're subsidizing the school districts. Now, as far as our taxpayers go, you can either pay the city or you can pay the school district. So we're not really saving taxpayer money, but I would rather not take responsibility for school district costs. I'd rather have the school district do that, and they have to levy the way they levy, and we have to levy the way we levy. So I think there are some opportunities there that we could take a closer look at. But is it going to amount to a lot? No. So enough said on that. Regarding the 0.7% of new debt, Mike knows I'm going to say this. I would prefer that new debt go to fire station number 2 improvements and not to community center improvements. I believe that community center improvements are something that need to get done at some point, but I would put these 2 expenditures in 2 different categories. The fire station 2 improvements are must-haves, and the community center improvements are nice-to-haves. And my personal view is I don't want to take on debt for nice-to-haves. I only want to take on debt for essentials. So, I would argue the 0.7, we could either cut it in half and say, okay, if we're not going to take on debt for the community center, well, we can reduce that. That would be a savings. Or we can just say, no, we're going to just focus the 0.7 on fire station number 2 improvements. And that I would like that better. But again, I'm not falling on a spear on that. And I don't know if I have other council members. Just because I want it doesn't mean my fellow council members are going to agree. But I think that must-have versus nice-to-have is an important separator for me, or it's an important way to segregate these expenditures that I think is important. And then finally, the $300,000 for the HRA levy. It's been at $300,000 for a long time. I think close to 10 years. And I know that in that is $75,000 that the council voted on a long time ago, 10 plus years ago, to help contribute to some of the costs for the Southwest Light Rail. And I believe that our commitment of $750,000, $75,000 a year expires next year. So unless so we could, that expenditure is going to go away. And so if we didn't redeploy those funds, our HRA levy could be $225,000 rather than $300,000. I'm not recommending that, but I did want to point out that we do have an expiring expenditure that we could go away and reduce the levy a little bit. So those are my comments, just comments for staff to consider. Not, if council has any thoughts on those, that's fine, but if not, I wanted to make those comments and I'm done.
Mayor, just a
Yes.
clarification. The $75,000 is done this year.
This year.
It's
So we've already
complete.
redeployed that. Okay, so it was done last year,
So for next year,
25.
you put 175 in for pathways.
Yep.
And you put 100 into the home enhancement and Welcome to Minnetonka loan
Okay.
programs.
All right.
And then
25.
Homes Within Reach for 25 for ongoing
Okay.
admin.
All right. Thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome.
So we already spent the $75,000 that I was talking about.
I mean, you could be allocated.
It's funny how we.
I just wanted you to know where you were
No,
at.
okay, well, thank you for that. Rebecca.
Very, very briefly, just regarding the debt service, I'm a bit of a realist, and I know not because through any fault of our own, but what's going on at the state, that the likelihood of bonding for Fire Station 2 is mid, I'll call it. And so I think it's important that we have flexibility on those funds. If the heavens open up and we get bonding on that, I wouldn't then be necessarily opposed. But this gives us the flexibility to make that decision if we need to, and gives us the money to do Fire Station 2, which we know we need to do.
We need to do, yeah.
And I would say that as regards the community center, our needs in the community center have changed because some of what we were going to do here, we don't need to do because we have office space over at the Marsh, blah, blah, blah. But it's almost like, to me, again, it's an investment that will pay dividends because it's getting dated enough that we can't rent it out the way we might be able to do if it was updated, for instance. And so I think that there's a return on the investment if we make it. That's my personal opinion.
Mhm.
I agree with you. There's a difference in degree of how much we need it, but we have been deferring the improvements in this building since I've been on the council. So that's starting to be a long time. So those are the kinds of things, we've done some things and not others.
Yeah, no, I think those are values questions, and I think they're legitimate questions. And I wanted to raise them. I'm not, I don't want to debate them. I just thought I'd throw my perspective out.
And I agree with you. I think there's a difference. It's a different category of need,
Yeah.
for sure.
And I think the point has been made, and that's the one. I mean, I think this is a tight budget that doesn't contain any easy decisions. And so to reduce it, we have to cut, I mean, what do we want to stop doing? What do we want to not do? Or what do we think we can get away without? I don't think it's a fat budget. I think it's a budget that realistically reflects our priorities and our values. And if we're looking to save, a few $100,000, there might be some ways to do it, but it's not. I just throw that out as a comment, and we'll leave it at that. Anyone else? All right, Mr. Funk, I think it's back to you.
All right, thank you, Brad.
I think we covered them all.
We did. Do we have enough on question 2? The .7 is, am I correct in hearing?
Yeah, I'm sensing general support for that. Yeah.
Thank you. We'll move on. I know,
All right.
Time sensitive.
Yep.
Do a time check. It's 8:50. We have still another wave of budget conversation. At this point, there's some directors, maybe the non-utility folks. If you want to.
You want to depart? You can.
Give them the pass.
No pressure. You can do
No,
it.
if we have to stay, they have to stay.
Thank you to our staff. They were here to answer questions.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye, Tom.
Okay.
All right, well, we'll keep it moving here. So this is looking at the utility rates. So we're looking at water and sewer rates and the rate structure, the stormwater fund itself for the fee amount there as well, and then looking at the recycling rates, the environmental recycling rate as well too. So these are kind of the questions that we'll pose at the end. Should have seen those in your packet.
Yeah.
There's a strategic plan relatability, so it's obviously infrastructure and asset management's an important piece of this. And finding the resources to continue to keep that infrastructure in high quality service is key. All right, so looking at the 2026 utility rates, and we'll try to get through this as quickly as we can here. And you just did see this at your last study session in October 27th, where we went through the asset management study along with the rate study provided by AE2S at that point in time. So there were a couple goals of that rate study, and the first one was to support the long-term fiscal health of the utilities. So really, in conjunction with the asset management plan, looking out over that 50, 70-year plan timeframe to make sure that we have a game plan in place to address the needs that the city will be feeling. And most importantly was looking at that one bar chart where we saw, most of Minnetonka developed in 1970s and then needing replacement in 2040 and 2070. And when I went back to my desk and did the math on 2040, it's not as far out there as it used to be. So it's kind of not right around the corner, but it sure feels like it when you start looking at the CIP and some long-range planning on that end of it. So it's important that we address that and are prepared for that and start to position ourselves. And then we wanted to look at the rate structure review. And so our rate structure has been in place for a number of years. There's some nuances to it that are a little bit confusing, I think, to ratepayers on that end of it. And so I wanted to kind of have them take a look at that, and they came back with some recommendations as well, too. And then part of it is to integrate and begin funding this renewal and replacement plan that AE2S mentioned, and that's kind of planning for that big hype down the road and making sure that we start paying attention to that. Obviously that we're not going to be able to save the dollars needed today to make that happen way down the road, but making sure that we start doing what we can to save some pennies here and there on that end of it. So this is just the long-term fiscal health of the utility. So AE2S provided a 20-year pro forma on our water and sewer fund along with our stormwater fund. That included all the CIP, the current CIP, the infrastructure asset assessment that Will and his group was working on, looking at growth in the city as well, all those types of things that we took into consideration, doing that 20-year forecast to make sure we addressed all of our capital needs, operating needs, those types of things on that end of it. Looking at the rate structure review, we really wanted to simplify the residential rates. We want to move from 4 tiers right now, which we have, down to 3 tiers, and kind of make those in line with what normal water usage is nowadays compared to what it was 20 years ago when those tiers first went into place. And then we want to institute a water base fee and a sewer base fee. And right now we have what's called an infrastructure fee on our utility bills. It gets classified according to our utility billing system as basically a sewer fixed charge because it goes into that little bucket behind the scenes on that end of it. And so in reality, it's for both water and sewer. It's one fund. The infrastructure fee is supposed to fund all of that. Residents get very confused. We get questions very regularly on what is the infrastructure fee, and I got kind of a spiel for my staff and to kind of tell them what that's for, but it's still hard for them to kind of comprehend what that is. And so really looking to make it a little bit clearer on the bill what the infrastructure fee is. So we want to have a water infrastructure fee or a charge and a sewer infrastructure charge per se on that end of it. We really want to look at the language as well too. We work with communications to maybe change some of the words from fees to charges or something to that nature to make sure that they kind of understand that the utility bill is not just the water bill, not just the water portion of the bill. It's a lot of things. We got 7, 8 different charges on there that fund a number of different projects and programs within the city. So, and then we look into the irrigation rate improvements as well too to kind of align them with our current process as well too. And obviously the communication piece of that is huge. We're going to plan if all this goes forward and is approved, we would have a big communication presence in January when new rates would go into effect towards the end of January potentially. We would put basically got 1 page dedicated in the Minnetonka memo for explaining the whole utility bill, and then we would do all their social media campaigns as well too to help explain and make it as transparent and as clean as possible on what that new bill may look like. And the reason why we're doing this as well too. It's not just to change the bill to collect more money, but it's really the planning piece of it from the long-term sustainability need on that end of it. And then obviously that integrating that renewal and replacement plan, understanding that there's that intense pressure coming down the road in the next 15 to 25 years on that end of it. The Performa does add some contributions to that kind of that savings bucket per se, and that range is kind of from 0 within the water fund, or was the sewer fund. I think it was 0 basically over the next 5 years. Maybe in that year 5 we started adding some dollars to it, versus the water fund had some ranges where it was negative the 1 year and it was positive a couple $100,000 the next year, and so it kind of ebbs and flows given the projects in place on that end of it. And what we did find from the studies that the stormwater fund is sitting in a fairly decent spot. They recommended just a continued kind of 3% increase in our rates there on the stormwater side of it. Talking to Will and to Phil on that end of it, I think the stormwater fund could use an additional percentages there as well too. But I think we got to get through this water and sewer piece first, and then we'll look at this down the road as additional stormwater projects come into play as well too. Because I think there's 200 stormwater ponds, and we do 1 a year. And so, it's a couple of years before we get to them all. We'll have it, so.
It's a lot of job security there.
Right. So here is one of the slides from the presentation from the October study session where AE2S presented. And so here's the existing rate structure and the projected one for 26. And so tonight we're recommending that same, no changes from that presentation that night. It would change it from the 4 tiers down to the 3 tiers. It would actually reduce the water usage in that first tier, because that's that kind of that critical usage, need for water at that first tier. And then in that second tier, it would increase more so. And then obviously in that third tier is that conservation tier where we want to try mitigate water usage as best as possible, given a certain extent as well too, because there are a couple big commercial water users in town as well too, and so we can't go astronomically high, otherwise it may be detrimental on that end of it as well too. And it's a little bit of a balance on this as well with AE2S recognize that the water rates, there's a relationship there. As they go higher, you are going to see reduced usage, which is
Good.
good to a certain extent, but then we also have to make sure we have enough dollars coming in as well too. And so I think that's where we look at both the combination of that, of the variable rate along with the fixed rate as well too, making sure that we have a consistent flow of revenues coming into the fund throughout the year. And so we would, at the top, you get the residential water, the 3 tiers there. Commercial, you would still have just the 2 tiers. We have a summer rate and a winter rate where we charge a little bit higher for the summer rate, which is, we're assuming there's probably some sprinkling going on that for commercial businesses that don't have a separate irrigation meter themselves. And then currently on our utility bill, we break out the Met Council portion of the bill. So there's another charge on there that says MCES charge or fee or something on that end of it. And so that's basically our pass-through amount for Met Council providing water treatment services for the city. And so that's about $5.6 million a year. And so we break that down into a rate based off of the number of gallons that we sell each year on that end of it. So looking at that rate for next year is 4.5 or $4.50. And something new that would come out of this rate study is that we didn't have a sewer operations and maintenance line items like we did on the water side of it. And so we do have sewer costs. I mean, we have sewer maintenance costs, operating costs, we have staff, we have routine maintenance things that we do as well too. And so breaking those costs down, it's about 0.66 cents per 1,000 gallons on that end of it and such. And so that would be another line item on that utility bill as well. And so you'd have your water variable charge, your sewer variable charge, your water and sewer fixed charges, and a Met Council pass-through charge as well too. So I don't know if I'm making it simpler or not, but it's kind of showing exactly where those dollars are going to or what they're allocated for.
Yeah, it just seems to make sense. I think if you compare it to like either your phone bill or your electricity bill, there's always basic delivery charges is what they call it. And this seems to be, really similar to this. It's the infrastructure that no matter how much or how little you use,
Right.
it has to,
Right.
a certain portion of that cost has to go.
Right.
And so I think, having the explanation and having those additional line items will help people understand. So I think you're very much sleep, I'm sorry to say.
I guess this is the volumetric side of it. So these are the variable costs. And now here would be the fixed charges on that end of it. Sorry about that. So, and so the fixed fee would be going up. Right now it's what, $78, $79 a quarter. In totality, it would be going up. So it's going to be more than that. It's going to be broken up between sewer and water fixed. But that's where we're looking to try and get that revenue that's needed to make sure that we have a need there for all that infrastructure in place. And so AE2S mentioned that they'd like to see that, what was it, like 40 to 50% of your fees be fixed fees, and we're sitting at about, what was it, 28% or something to that nature. So with this adjustment, we'll kind of get back into a little better alignment on that end of it and such. And so that is a tougher piece of that, especially for those low volume users, is that they're going to have some bigger fixed fees on that end of it, or fixed charges, I should say, on that end of it. But
you said that the usage fees though kind of go down a little bit. For
Yep.
lower volume.
Yeah, the usage fees on that low volume. So if you are a low volume user, your rate is going to decline, but it's not much in the grand scheme of things on that end of it compared to the fixed fee. So.
One quick question.
Yep.
Do our residents broadly understand that all the wastewater that we generate is treated by the Met Council?
I would venture not, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering if should be an explanation. I mean, if there's a Met Council charge, then I think we should provide the context of why that would be. Otherwise, people have such a negative view of the Met Council.
Right.
So what are they charging us for? They have no, I think having them understand that they provide a service and they're getting paid for a service is important communication.
I bet it's interesting to see how many people know that they provide wastewater service treatment. It's probably.
Yeah, so I think just clarity on this, because I mean, this is a big change, And that's fine, and I think it's well-intended and well thought out, but let's just make sure that it's understandable to the people who are going to be paying it, because I think that just protects us a lot.
Yeah. And we do that currently. We do break out the Met Council charge on the utility
Right.
bill right now. But
Yeah.
It'll save you a lot of phone calls.
I don't know if it's going to save us a lot of phone calls, no matter what we do, but that's okay. We'll get through it.
We got the right people on those.
Yeah, so. And so on the stormwater side, there wasn't recommended any changes there, so we're staying status quo. They agreed with our, kind of our rate structure, our different property types, those types of things on that end of it. And there again, just kind of the smaller 3% increase is what they're projecting for next year on that end of it. On the outlook then, obviously we're gonna have a bigger increase in '26 for the water sewer side of things. And so here's kind of the projections for going out for '27 through '30 on that end of it. And I really wouldn't see things changing a whole lot from that. We got our projects are in the CIP right now that we know that are taking place, so unless something blows up or projects come in, significantly different, I would assume that our rates for the out years should be fairly similar to this on that end of it, so. And this is tough to see, but this is similar, this was one of the slides they presented as well too. So the yellow highlight in the middle there, or middle-ish area, that's Minnetonka, and that's kind of where we're at. They do kind of a regional-wide utility survey every year, and this is the Minneapolis metro area here with the cities that participated. So these aren't necessarily our comparables, these are just the cities that contributed to this survey that they do. And so they do this free every year. If you contribute to it, you get the information. It's kind of a nice service that they've offered over the years on that end of it. So even with our rate increases where they're at, we'd still kind of find ourselves kind of in the middle of the pack, even though it feels like our rates are going higher and higher. They're kind of still kind of where we're at. We're a second ring suburb on that end of it that's been developed for a while, and things are needing replacement and needing maintenance and those types of things. So here was just kind of some of our peer communities. This isn't necessarily all of our comparables either. This is kind of cities around the area per se on that end of it. Compares the 25 and 26 Minnetonka rates in there as well too. So you can see we're obviously a little bit on the higher end. The other rates for the other cities are their current rates, not necessarily their 26 rates. So those would probably adjust a little bit as well, but we would be a little bit on the higher end, or on the higher end for those cities, but kind of the comparable city ages in Edina or St. Louis Park, those types of things on that end of it as well too. Whereas Maple Grove, Eden Prairie are a little bit newer development, those types of things. Any questions on water, sewer, stormwater? Before we move into environmental recycling, we'll keep it moving.
Keep her moving.
Okay. So if you recall, last year we entered into a 3-year extension with Republic Services. That was for 25, 26, and 27. The 2026 in that contract were increases for each of those years. 2026 calls for a 4.6% increase to recycling, to the old school or the general recycling pieces of that. But we also included citywide organic collection last year as well too. So we took that in-house and providing it as a service of the city versus each hauler charging the residents for that. That was due to a Hennepin County ordinance law change that required every resident to have organic recycling charged to them, no matter if they're using it or not. So all the private haulers were charging their their customers that fee, and may or may not have been utilizing organic recycling on that end of it. The city took it in-house. We were able to negotiate a contract and say, okay, rather than pay what you're paying to your hauler, your private hauler, we would do it for $3.10 per resident across the entire city, based off of your assumed organic collection rates at that point in time, which we were kind of in that range of 0 to 10% participation. And the assumption was that as participation increased, which is good, getting more people to participate, that increased the cost to the hauler because they're having to haul, they have more staff time, more equipment, more disposal costs, those types of things associated with it. So as more residents sign up for it, our costs are going to increase. And so in 2025, we've already gone up. We're in the third step, second step or third step, Joel? We're in the
third now.
We're in the third now.
Just barely in the third.
Okay. So we're in the, so we were in the 0 to 10. We were in the, when then we went through the 10 to 15, and now we're in the 15 to 20% range on that end of it. So right now, Republic is charging us $4.10 per resident. We're collecting $3.10 per resident per month. And so that math doesn't work well for our cash balance in our environmental recycling fund. If you remember back to that summary chart, we have a negative cash balance in there, and so we need to probably increase those rates. And assuming that we kind of continue on this increase of trajectory of increased participation, we're really projecting that we should probably shoot for that 20 to 25% factor for 2026. And so that rate, did this not get changed?
627.
That number isn't the right number, I don't think. What, Joel, what was that?
481 was.
Okay. Yes, it was, okay. All right. For some reason that didn't get saved. We were working on that later. So that this next year will be $4.81. So it'll go from 310 to 481, and that'll keep us in that 20 to 25% range, and that would then go into effect in January as well too. So that'll help us kind of hopefully get caught back up a little bit and then maintain through that tier for 2026 on that end of it. We only change rates once a year because they're done by ordinance, but if we see that we're continuing to escalate with participation, we may have to look at doing additional increases for the organic recycling piece of that. If we get to a next tier sometime in mid-26 or something of that nature, we may have to look at adjusting rates because we can't fall too far behind on that end of it, otherwise it'd be tough to catch up, so.
Sorry, I have to just ask a quick question. Do we have any letters now to, this was kind of something I recall during our discussion about adopting this and going with Republic, that, you know, getting to the point where they were the only ones that they would, I mean, that's a significant increase, that they, you know, that percentage-wise, that they've increased the cost, then just, you know, do we have any way to negotiate now those increases, or they're just already set in stone?
I'll defer that one to Will, but I would assume it's a 3-year contract, so I would assume.
Okay.
Yeah, in the contract, we had, you know, the escalation based on participation, so since it went up, they charge us, you know, we went up, I think it's 600 or 700 residents signed up, which is great. It did increase, so they're set until the contract expires, where we could certainly do an RFP at that time.
Okay.
But we didn't have anything to negotiate further.
Right, got it, because we couldn't negotiate.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And I would-
also, isn't there something from the state legislation that's starting in, was it 29, that we're gonna get reimbursed for some of this recycling?
I don't, the news to me on.
It was in the budget, sorry.
We get, you know, we do have a small reimbursement from the county.
Oh, for the score
that's
grant
the
funds or
county.
something to that nature?
Yeah. That makes more sense. Right, go ahead.
Okay,
Keep going on.
okay.
Sorry.
And it should be kind of noted as well too that these residents were paying for organic recycling beforehand, and I don't remember what those rates were beforehand, Will, but they were probably paying, even when we go up to the next rate, they were probably paying more than that before we went to the organized collection piece of that, I would assume. So, so I think we're still coming out, it's still coming out as a beneficial deal for the residents on that end of it. So here was the 481, I had a duplicate slide in there that got in there by accident, so.
It happens.
It happens, right. So with that, so with the environmental recycling, so we would look to increase the rates to $12.90 per month, which that includes the 4.6% contract increase by Republic. And then the assumption that we're at that 20 to 25% tier at the monthly organic charge of $4.81 a resident. And then that also would include the cost to operate the brush and leaf drop, and also the special events that we do out the Public Works as well too.
I was at the leaf drop today, and there's a lot of leaves there. It's quite impressive. It's like 30 feet high pile of leaves. I mean, it's impressive.
So
You climb to the top.
I did not climb. I did not climb.
You can't do the jump into it.
I did not. Just want you to know that I, observe these things.
very good. And so here's just a comparison of kind of an average volume user of water and a kind of a low volume user of water as well. seeing what they would see on their utility bill with all of our fees, with their environmental recycling, water and sewer, stormwater, all of those types of things. The slide is a little bit small, so I didn't break out the infrastructure into water and sewer. That's just, it's combined in there. But you can see that monthly impact or quarterly impact's about 13 to 14% based off of your usage on that end of it and such. So it's not a small increase for this next year, but it's a needed increase to kind of get us set in a good spot moving forward and to begin planning, not begin planning, but continue planning for our future needs on that end of it. So,
Kimberly.
I'm just wondering, what was the communication with residents around the organic recycling fee? I mean, I know we said during meetings and stuff that the more people that signed up, the more it would cost. But as far as like what was in the Minnetonka memo and what was on the website, and like how aware are people that fees will go up as participation increases? Or how aware did we try to make people? I know we can't make them read.
Yeah, I think we.
Well, it was I mean, I'm sorry. It was so. There's been communication, to your point, Kimberly, in the memo through our social media channels that this was coming. I'd have to look back when that was done, but we have pushed that out. Certainly, there's a lot more that we need to do. Andrew's been looped. Our communications team has been looped into it.
I wonder if what Kimberly's asking is, are people aware that they're not just requesting organics just to request it, that if they should request it if they're going to use it, but if they're not using it, that maybe they should return their,
if they got just an empty
you know, is
bin
there, I don't know if there, is that what you're asking?
No, but that's a good point, actually. But, yeah, so I was just wondering, like, no one likes surprises, right?
Right.
And, like, I know we tried to communicate to people so that they aren't surprised, and I don't know, so I just wanted to know.
I remember
how good a job we've done, I guess.
Well, and I know I got an email shortly after the meeting saying, what's this about organic waste? Do we have to sign up? I mean, and so whatever happened, people
Yeah, well,
are
and
going
I
to be
know
confused.
I've had conversations with people saying, well, you should, you know, you're paying for it already.
Right.
You should sign up for it and use it.
But it is kind of, it's one of those counterintuitive things, because usually you think, okay, as quantity goes up, prices go down because of the quantity discount. But in reality, as usage goes up, they have to expand their capability and expand the amount of equipment and the number of stops, so their costs go up and so their charges go up. And so it is, I mean, I mean, my recollection is we did a pretty good job of communicating it. But I also think that, did people really embrace it and get it? I'm not sure they did, because it is counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Right. Do you remember, we'll make a note, thank you for bringing it up, we'll make a note. I know communications has pushed out information. We'll take a look and reevaluate what that cadence looks like. It's going to be important to push that out.
Yeah.
That's a very good point.
it might be interesting to see tonnage as well too, that of what Republic has, you know, on the organic side, if that's possible, we could track that maybe, along with our new or increased participation. Is tonnage actually going up as well too?
I can speak to this a little bit, because we did sign up. We do have the bin in our garage, but as we collected our organic stuff, and all the fruit flies that it attracted really diminished the popularity of the program at my house. And so now I think I've got 2 banana peels, you know, a week in my bin, and I don't feel like I'm really taking full advantage of organics recycling. But you know, there are accompanying problems that make it more difficult than one would like. I mean, my intentions are good, my execution is poor, just so you know. Confession's good, right?
Good. All right. For good, we'll keep on moving. And so
Yeah, let's
that's
keep
about all I
moving.
had. If there wasn't any other.
Okay, if
other
anybody
questions on
really
the rate, so-
disagrees with these, let us know. Otherwise, we're going to keep moving. Are we good?
Yeah, we're
Keep
good.
moving. All
We're
right,
good.
great.
We talked
All right.
about it.
All right, so we are good there. I need, so next one is the Are we at the antenna lease schedule?
Antenna lease.
So this is in your, is it the
Packet?
It's in your packet, but
Yep.
it's part of our requirement each year to show you this
Okay.
antenna lease schedule because the city manager has authority beyond his $175,000 purchasing policy piece of that. So you need to see the schedule every year or approve it or be aware of it anyway, so.
So it's required by ordinance, that's.
Ordinance.
And rightfully so, and there was
Yep.
authority assigned to the city manager role to manage these contracts. We do negotiate. We turn to Mr. Nelson here. It is quite often, and I say often, monthly or more frequently. Or Will's involved too, and Julie's involved. We get requests all the time from these carriers who want to renegotiate contracts, they want to put new antennas up, so.
The mayor gets requests too,
There's generally there's quite a bit of activity on here.
just so you know.
Okay,
There
I'm
we-
prepared. All right.
There it is.
There it is.
Yeah.
So it's required by ordinance because that authority is granted to the city manager role that we report, I have to report to you.
I'm sorry.
That activity. So this is a summary of that activity. It's in your packet. Eric, do you want to add anything to it?
Just echoing the city manager's comments that we do get regular requests to renegotiate. At this point, toward the end of the year, it seems they come in once a week at least. City policy is, and I don't know if this is actually written policy, but it's certainly practice and consistent practice is that we don't renegotiate until we're in the last year of the lease term. Or if there is a certain modification that they're requesting where we might entertain some discussion about extension of term. But otherwise, we usually decline those requests, and they of course can renew them when they're approaching or in the final year of the lease term.
And a fair point is that $633,000 of revenue that we do not have to ask our taxpayers for.
Correct.
Yeah, that goes straight into the general fund, so yes, that is tax reduction revenue
Right.
right there, so.
And I get these emails every once in a while from providers that act like I own the property. And, well, the lot you own is maybe under consideration for an antenna, and I don't spend too much time with those.
Okay.
Great, good job, Mike.
Thank you.
Oh, good, thank you. I'll sleep better tonight.
Will,
All
do
right.
you have anything to add to that?
No, I think and like Eric was saying, I mean, we get a lot of requests to lower fees and we don't negotiate that, so we're locked in.
What happens is
Well,
these carriers hire third-party vendors.
Sure.
And it's usually a third-party vendor that's negotiating on behalf, like an
Right.
AT&T or a Verizon. And
They're
so
like
it's a
collection
And
agencies.
so it's just a third-party vendor,
Yeah.
it's no lost cause for them to ask, we always
Yeah.
say no, but they're out
Gotta
there.
try.
If they can try and get a better deal, that's what they're trying to do, but we.
Do we have a form letter that say we are willing to raise your rates 10%?
Yeah, right.
Thank you. Thank you for writing to us. Okay.
All right. Last thing under the budget piece tonight is the grant tractor update as well too. So it's been a little while since we've given you this, but you're well aware of it out there. So let's just kind of been in charge of this application of it. So we'll kick it over to her for an update.
Yeah, so I'll just give you a quick update. It's okay, Darren, I'll let you
Okay.
know when to scroll. Since 2024, we have been awarded 37 grants, and we currently have 16 submitted, so kind of in the pending status. If you see the left side shows departments, we do have one in administration now. Jay submitted a grant, and I think he was awarded the grant. And then most of them are in fire, police, and public works. And then on the right side, since 2024, we have been awarded $4 million in grants, and then with the city match, it's just slightly over $5 million. And then the right side is total across the pending status, awarded, and denied. So that's what those totals are. And if you want to scroll down, Darren. The left side's the revenue source, so I believe a lot of them come from the state dollars. If you go over to the blue bar.
Yep.
Yep, that's 2025. So that side is state. And then the yellow is local, and then the orange is private/nonprofit. And then on the right side shows how the grants align with the strategic plan. The purple is 2024, the blue is 2025, so most of them align with safe and healthy community. And the next one is infrastructure and asset management. And then livable, well-planned development. And that one must be sustainability. And then the last one is community inclusiveness. And then below just shows how the grants are at risk for federal dollars. We have none in the red category, which is the high risk. And then moderate is the yellow. Low is green. And if you scroll down a little bit more, we have if you scroll up a little bit, 43 says NA, so it's not, those grants aren't applicable to federal dollars. And then below that are this is where all those amounts get pulled from, is this report, which lists all the grants. Are
Nicely
there
done.
questions?
Nice.
No, it's a
Very
good summary.
Good job.
Yep, nice dashboard.
This, as you know, it's been a real focus for us the last couple of years, and real credit to Sarissa for pulling all this data together, and a credit to all of our directors. It has been an emphasis. Our directors are continuing to look at opportunities where we can. We're very selective on where we apply dollars, apply for dollars, because when you get grant dollars, you take a victory lap, but that's when also there's a lot of work tied to these dollars. And so that's why we're selective in what we choose. We're not asking for every grant that's available. We want to make sure that it's something that is attainable, it fits within our strategic plan, it supports the work that we're doing if it's not part of the strategic plan, and it's something that we can manage. We also have to have the staff to also manage these as well, because there's a lot of effort in that. So appreciate that. Thank you, Sarissa. Great work on really pulling that together, because one of our goals has been to look at other revenue streams outside of property taxes. So there's been an emphasis to really write a lot of grants, and we've been doing that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
We are done with that item.
All right.
Thank you for all your feedback. I appreciate it. I know
All
it
right.
was long, but we do truly appreciate your feedback and discussion on it, so.
Well, just thank you all. I mean, it's been a long process. It's been a long night, but, you know, I mean, taxing people is hard. And you know, people are pretty open with what they don't like. But, you know, I think our budget is well considered. I think it reflects our values, and I think it's very defensible. So, you know, well done, and thank you all for your efforts. And I don't know. All right. So are we up to 30 minutes of open time? Do we feel like we have? Do we feel like we have 30 minutes? We can vote to bypass this.
Kimberly
and,
does not have.
you got an 8 o'clock flight.
I'm flying out in the morning. I have to be, and it's going to snow in the airport. Anyway, so
You
I'd
ready
like
to go?
home.
All right. How about December study session?
We had one item.
Okay, one item?
We had one item that was submitted. Sarissa has the handout. I'm not looking to backtrack at all.
Okay.
Just so you're aware, there's an item submitted. Deb, maybe Deb could just speak very quickly on it.
Yeah, I can speak just super quick. So I heard from a resident who's an attorney, who's very concerned about the rising trend of cryptocurrency fraud. And there's a national trend where people are urged to go to a cryptocurrency machine that's in a business and put lots of cash into the machine, and they are just ripped off of, you know, tens of thousands of dollars. And it is a national, I mean, it's a real problem nationally. And he would like, there are cities around the metro that have prohibited them. I think Stillwater's one, maybe Apple Valley, there are a couple. And he would like us to consider that. And so I just wanted to get it on everyone's radar, and I think it's worthy of a discussion in the future. And I will forward to staff some of the articles and sample ordinances that he identified. And that's all I can say on that.
All right.
Good.
Um,
And what we could do, Mayor, I know we're,
Yeah.
short- I think we're getting, we're at the end of the line here tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you, Deb, for submitting that. I think as maybe Deb mentioned, we'll just add this maybe to the list.
Right.
Because it is
Good idea.
November, and we have a December study session right around the corner where we'll start teeing up items for next year. And so, if that's all right, Deb, council just suggests, let's.
Yeah.
Yeah,
maybe
no,
look at-
I think it's a good
That
idea. I
makes
mean,
sense.
we have a strong interest in protecting our residents from fraud. We want to stay in our lanes, but I think there are things from an information perspective and, also looking at maybe some of those other ordinances. Maybe Eric can advise us on, some direction that might be appropriate because, we have an aging population, our average age, I mean, and not that senior citizens are heavily into crypto, but they are very at risk for fraud, and anything we can do to protect our residents, I think we want to see, if there's appropriate things we can do.
And then
Thanks, Deb.
Eric was prepared to, any 30 seconds of commentary or?
Sounds like we have a schedule to consider it going forward, and I won't belabor any time right now.
Sounds good, thank you. And then council, last thing, study session work plan, again, it is November, you are down to your final month. December will be.
That means more to some of us than others.
Yeah, yes, it is true.
We're going to
Mayor.
celebrate you, Mayor.
Just to give you a sense, December study session is full. I will send out a preemptive email to you, maybe the end of this week, no later than early next week, just to start teeing up these items, so you're prepared for that December study session. If I can get this slide over. So staff is looking to present strategic plan action steps. We want to get those to you ahead of time so we can spend some time talking through action steps. The study session work plan. So again, part of the email to you is to start teasing this out from you ahead of time. So we want to be as efficient as we can in December. We've got then the legislative breakfast coming up, so we want to start talking about legislative priorities. So again, we'll provide to you some staff suggestions on that. We've been talking as a staff what thoughts we'd have to share with you, and we'll certainly want to get those solidified. And then your appointments for next year, certainly with the mayor's absence, we'll kind of move some things around for mayor, we're some new mayor in, and then moving some juggling of where people will land with different commissions, whether it's MLC or league and those sorts of things. So a lot of stuff there. Again, I'll send out an email to everybody within the next
email
week.
that list of the positions,
Yeah.
and then maybe if people have a strong interest, because this was a tension, I think, last year. If people have a strong interest in something, they can let Mike or me know, and then we can try to make sure people feel like they're being used effectively and where they're showing up.
And I'll offer that, obviously, I won't be on any of those next year. If anyone wants information on things that I've been a participant in and know more about that, feel free to give me a holler, send me an email or a text. I'll be happy to talk about that.
Okay. So heavy December, but again, that email hopefully will help things out and get some things kind of percolating up, so it makes that meeting go quicker.
All right,
Thank
thanks,
you.
everyone. It was a heavy November one, too.
was a lot.
But Kimberly.